Looking for the latest comic book to add to your collection? How about the last card for that Magic the Gathering Commander deck? Well, the comic book stores got you covered. Shop online at comicbookstore.tcgplayerpro.com or come in person at 30 North Main Street, Glassboro, New Jersey. Pizza people, welcome back. We've got a lot of exciting news. Oh my goodness, what a Thursday it was. We're actually recording this still on the day that all this news came out, but if you don't already know, there were tons of cards that were spoiled, and on top of that, we got a little bit of some insight on what the next sets are going to be. I'm going to be joined by HamHocks42 today. HamHocks, how are you doing?
Dude, I am stoked. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's the day of all these big reveals. It's kind of like late at night, but I'm gotta be honest, I'm over the moon. I'm totally energized. It's new cards, and to be honest, with New Capenna having come out in April, like I'm ready for new standard cards. I mean, like, come on, bring them on. Like, I'm so excited, and not to like, okay, spoiler warning for the rest of this video. The set looks good. Okay, let's just lead with that.
It
But
looks
anyway, we'll
really
get
good,
into it.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is gonna be fun.
So yeah, you can find the description for all of our content, all the links down below. So definitely check that out. Catch us on Twitch, catch us on YouTube. Um, but yeah, let's dive right into it. The first thing that I actually want to talk about before we get into spoilers is actually
hmm
the 2022 to 2023 release schedule. So this was actually revealed today on the Wizards of the Coast official stream. This is actually the names of the sets. They're going to be coming out for pretty much about a year here. So first, this fall, in pretty much just a few weeks here, we're going to have Dominaria United, which we're starting to get the spoilers, which we're going to talk about today. Followed up by the Brothers War in fall. Then in the winter, we also have, excuse me, this is winter 2023, it looks like.
Yep.
Um,
After the new year. Yep.
Yep. So we actually have Phyrexa, All Will Be One. So it looks like we're still continuing this Dominaria United Brothers World saga. Then in
hmm
the springtime, we actually have some more of this, which is going to be March of the Machine. And then in the spring as well, the second half of that set is going to be March of the Machine, the Aftermath. So we don't really know too much specifically about those. You can kind of tell that they're a bit connected in terms of the story, the lore. And then the
hmm
next two sets that we're actually showing here are quite interesting. We're making a return to Eldraine. So Wilds of Eldraine for fall. Can't wait to see the new Oko. And then in the winter time, we
Hopefully, like a
have
5 mana Oko. That's not quite as insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
no 2 mana, just Simic.
ah. Yeah. 2 mana starting loyalty 9. Let's go.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
go all the way. And then for the winter 2024, so potentially like a January type situation, we have
hmm
Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So we're returning back to Ixalan. Hopefully the set this time is a little bit more powerful. I think last time it was more of like a Kamigawa type set where you have like 5 or 6 cards that are overtly powerful, and then the rest of the
hmm
set is full of just like a bunch of flavor, but not anything too much going on. Ham, we got a lot of Dominaria. We're gonna be on Dominaria for what feels like a
Well,
year here.
we're gonna be on Dominaria for a little bit, and this is definitely we're gonna be focused on the war with the Phyrexians, and it looks like it's actually gonna. I did get a chance to watch the live stream, and like huge shout out to everybody in my chat who was hanging out. I got the privilege of like, extending my stream a little bit long today, so I got to watch it live with my chat. It was a lot of fun, and so they did comment the Phyrexia All Will Be One. We're actually returning to new Phyrexia for that set. So we're going back to Mirrodin, baby. We're doing it.
Oh
Um,
yeah, the
which
original.
I am so excited about. So we're going, obviously Mirrodin having been Phyrexianized in the whole Scars of Mirrodin, New Phyrexia block. So I mean, one of those things you can't talk about that setting and kind of um that whole idea mechanically without talking about infect.
hmm
So it'll be very interesting to see if they want to go back to that with Phyrexia all will be one. We'll see. But yeah, no, we're gonna be on Dominaria for a little bit. There was also a comment that was made on the live stream about Brothers War. Now we knew about Dominaria United and Brothers War already. They were announced last year when they like did this unveil, last year for 2022. So like, okay, we knew they were coming. Great. Like, and I was excited about Brothers War when they first announced it. I'm still jazzed about that. I can't wait. But I believe it was Jimmy Wong mentioned during the live stream that the story with the Phyrexians will continue with the Brothers War. Or like they made a little like side comment like that. And so there have been some theories that the Phyrexians will actually travel back in time and try to influence the events of the Brothers' War. I have no. This is all like tinfoil hat theory, like speculation at this point. But like when that was said on stream, I was like, "Oh snap, are we doing it? Like, is Elish Norn somehow gonna twist the fabric of time so we can? I mean, time travel's not unheard of. I mean, obviously the whole
Teferi, right? Like
yeah, well,
Teferi's
Teferi, that's kind of Teferi's jam, yeah. And
yeah.
we've got the events that are portrayed in Nexus of Fate with Sarkin going back in time. Like this wouldn't be the first time that we've done
Hmm.
a time travel story in Magic. So I'm intrigued by that idea. So Brothers War is going to be dope. I can't wait. And then we're going back to New Phyrexia. And then with March of the Machines, it sounds like kind of the climactic, kind of the Avengers Endgame of this whole Phyrexian war, which I am stoked because we're already seeing a pattern of Planeswalkers getting completed. We saw that with Cameo and Kamigawa. There's another one that we're going to be talking
Yeah,
about
the
today. I'm
sleeper
sure you saw
agents, as they call them. That's what they call them on
the
stream.
sleeper
Yeah.
agents, exactly. So I have no doubt that Phyrexia is going to continue, assimilating planeswalkers, and we're going to have this big climactic battle where we're going to see characters we love on both sides for March of the Machines. So I'm not sure where like that's going to be taking place. If they mentioned on stream, I don't recall. So sorry if I'm, letting the team down there. But I have a feeling it's probably going to actually take place over multiple planes. And then it's kind of funny because in Fall of Winter we have the Eldraine and Ixalan clearly designed, actually kind of similarly to I believe the first Eldraine. Lore wise was kind of a palate cleanser after War of the Spark.
That's
It was
true.
like
Yeah.
this huge bolus arc that like spanned like 3 or 4 years, of storytelling, and finally they were like, "No, let's just do some fun fairy tale stuff." And so we're
Let's
kind of
print
doing that.
adventures. How about we
Well,
just print 5 cards we need to ban in
yeah,
standard? How about that?
there's that. Like, so okay,
Uh,
the mechanics and the flavor didn't really align
but I
there.
love that set, and I'm excited to go back. Right, like
I am too. I am too. But
yeah, it's
I
gonna
find
be
it
cool.
it's really funny because like the whole bolus cycle that we got through a little while back now, ended with Eldraine, as kind of the follow up. Again, like the palate cleanser, it's kind of like the joke after the big horror scene in the movie, to kind of break the tension and kind of keep, get back to let's have some fun now that things have gotten
Right.
like really serious. I find it really hilarious that that's just the role Eldraine plays narratively. It's like, okay, this was a really intense, long running story arc. Okay, then we do Eldraine. Like, okay, cool. Like,
Yeah.
which is fine. It works. I mean, the fairy tale setting, like, the gingerbread people with like Garrick chowing down on one of them and the little gingerbread woman going for revenge in the trailer. That was adorable. I'm like, like we can't lose sight. Like, Eldraine had a lot of crazy impacts because of the design philosophy that fed into the cards themselves. And obviously, that was the impact that really rippled across Magic. But at the end of
Mhm.
the day, the setting, the flavor, the way they rolled it out, how many little like, fairy tale homages that they did in there that were just distinct enough so Disney didn't sue them. Um like it was fun. Like it was just fun. Like Seven Dwarves, the glass slipper being like red to give haste, and like those little things were a lot of fun. And I hope they lean into the flavor with the wilds of Eldraine. And hopefully the power level's not quite as
Yeah,
insane.
how about we just tone it down
Yeah,
just
exactly.
a
Just
little
just
bit.
dial it back a little bit, guys. Yeah,
Just a
if they're
little
just
bit.
like hey, by the way, Love Strike, Beast, Great Henge, and Embercleave are gonna get reprinted. I'm like, I'm out. I don't wanna.
Yeah,
I don't
that
want to do
point
this
it's like,
again.
well, I think the standard's probably not gonna be
Yeah,
good.
I don't think they're gonna do that. I think they learned their lesson.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I hope.
Ixalan's cool because
Excellent.
Ixalan
Yeah.
was like a set that originally we were all like ridiculously excited for. It was like, oh man, this is like the beginning of
Mm-hmm.
Magic kind of doing different things. When Innistrad, or excuse me, when Ixalan came out, which was like, oh, we got pirates, we got dinosaurs, we've got like all these other random things, and you're like, yeah, ninjas, and maybe I'm excited, like, yeah, let's go
Mm-hmm.
crazy, and then it kind of flopped. The cards were kind of like
Yeah.
meh. It was a nice set where it had some playable things in it, but it obviously wasn't like the powerhouse sets that were like around it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm excited to see what they end up doing this time. I mean, I'm actually excited to kind of get some more dinosaurs where, who knows, maybe they add enough dinosaurs and then we end up having like an explored dinosaur deck.
That'd be awesome. And I've actually played a couple of dinosaur decks in like Explorer and Historic, and they are pretty rough. Like you can tell. Like there are a couple that are pretty like decent, But it's funny, one of the best cards that actually makes that whole archetype sing was actually not from Ixalan at all. Like, they added Marauding Raptor, I believe it was in
Yeah, the
M20,
M
and,
set.
like,
Yep.
yeah, exactly, it was one of the core sets, and it, like, that really makes the Dino deck pop. You know, the moment that shows up, then stuff happens. But, like, until then, it was, like, I can only imagine playing in Ixalan, which, at the same time, like, Ixalan was already out when I was getting back into the game, so I didn't have the moment when somebody saw Colossal Dreadmouth, like, when I saw Colossal Dreadmought for the first time and went, "Holy cow, I can attack with dinosaurs now? This is gonna be awesome." Because
Yeah.
obviously dinosaurs are sweet, right? Like, they're just fun. Like, I don't know about you, but, like, as a little kid, I freaking love dinosaurs. You know, I grew up with Jurassic Park. I'll
Yeah.
own it, you
I
know?
love it.
Of course. So, yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, because I have a feeling I if they average out Eldraine and Ixalan, if they meet in the middle for both of those sets, we're gonna be in for a great year next year.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, that's pretty much kind of like a preview of what to expect here for the next year. Essentially, we don't really have much information outside of these names, but we can kind of just go back and forth and essentially, like Ham said, put on the tinfoil hat and kind of just guess on what we expect to see. So yeah, Dominaria United. We're back to Dominaria. We're gonna see literally pretty much every main character throughout Magic's history is going to be in this set. I can already
Just
say that
about.
with pretty good
Mhm.
confidence. We're gonna see a lot of different things. There was a picture that looked like it had like Junji in it. It had like a Sika's Chariot.
Mhm.
It had like Angrath, maybe Tongarth. Just all these really cool cards that we haven't seen for a long time. We've even seen potential previews of a Weatherlight that was Phyrexianized, which is actually
Mhm.
behind me in the picture that we chose for the backdrop. So,
Nice.
fortunately, you can't see
Okay.
it right now, but when we get that card, we're definitely gonna be talking about it.
Oh my goodness, yes. It's horrifying, by the way.
Yeah,
It's
it's pretty
like,
scary.
yeah. Well, and this is one of those things, like, the Phyrexia right now is taking our childhood and just twisting it. I mean, it's really cool. Like, it's like, from a storyteller's perspective, I can appreciate it. As a Magic fan, it's like some of this stuff really hurts to see. Like, I was a surprise. Like, I saw the picture of the Phyrexianized Weatherlight like a day or two ago on Twitter, and
Hmm.
when I looked at it, I was like, man, I didn't realize how much I cared about that ship until I saw it, like, perverted. It was like,
Yeah,
anyway, it was, yeah,
yeah, it was
I gotta
nuts.
say,
Pretty mind
creative
blowing.
team over at Wizards killing it with this.
Yeah,
Absolutely
this
killing
set's
it.
a really
Yeah.
good call out to like old school players because
Mm-hmm.
you we've been treated to a bunch of different things over the last couple years, 3 years, 4 years even, but now like we're everything's kind of culminating. Like it already happened a little bit with War of the Spark, right? We got
Mm-hmm.
Bolus, but you kind of started feeling that, we were still almost in like that new Magic, right? But like with
Yes.
this, you actually have the sense that they're bringing everyone back, and it definitely has invasion block feelings where
Mm-hmm.
you know that it's gonna take everyone to stop this like just terrible force that exists in the multiverse essentially, and without everyone's help they might not make it, and we just saw the names of some of these sets, and even with their help, honestly, I mean, it's gonna be bad. Like we might actually see almost every main character dead
It's
for the
possible.
first time in a long time.
I mean, some of the
um
story beats that they've confirmed with this already. I mean, like, the feeling that happened when, like, it still blows my mind when Kamigawa Neon Dynasty was first spoiled. And I don't know how, like, I don't think it really got leaked, or at least I didn't see any leaks about it. I try not to engage with leaks, but in any event, sometimes they're tough to avoid when you just have, magic notifications on all your search engines and things. Um, but when Tameo's completion got spoiled, I remember people freaked out because, like, she was one of the nicest, just kindest souls, and now she's been twisted by the dark side, and that was such a crazy moment. And the thing is, it's continuing here. So whatever your favorite character is, whatever your favorite planeswalker is, man, I hope you're not too attached, because, like, we're gonna be putting them through a gauntlet here.
oh yeah.
Things are gonna get real.
So yeah, let's
Yeah.
go ahead and dive
Yes, let's
right
get
into
into it.
here. So the first card, before the stream even went live, we were treated to a card that I honestly never thought I'd ever see be reprinted into Standard. That's right, Liliana of the Veil in Standard. Ham, this card.
She's
There's a lot
here.
to say about
Yeah.
this card. It's arguably easily one of the best Planeswalkers ever printed. It doesn't have as much like power as the card used to at one point in Modern specifically. And you can even go back to like Legacy at one point. Like Liliana of the Veil was like a powerhouse. In Standard,
Mhm.
it was never really like an insane card. It was just a really good Planeswalker. Um, and I feel like that's almost in Standard. I feel like that's almost where we can see the card again.
Mhm.
With the combination of good black cards like Graveyard Trespasser, Infernal Grasp, we have to remember that some of these cards are actually rotating out.
Mhm.
But we're still going to be able to see Grass, maybe pair it up with Sorin, like Liliana the Veil into Sorin feels pretty good, right? Where
Yeah.
maybe you discard spell, removal spell, Planeswalker. Planeswalker that removes and Planeswalker that essentially eats the hand. Sorin redraws you some cards. So, um, yeah, I mean, Liliana the Veil is just one of the most iconic cards of all time in Magic. You're gonna see it in Explorer. You're gonna see it in Pioneer. You're gonna see it in Historic. This is a card that it's gonna get played. It's gonna get played in every single format that it's gonna be legal in, on Arena, and in real life it already does. In Paper Magic, this card wherever it's legal, it finds ways in specific decks, whether or not they be like rack type strategies or just classic Jund or Sagavan. Even nowadays, you play like
Mhm.
Ragavans and stuff. Like now, you can actually play. Uh, Now that Luris is banned, you can start playing your Lilies and all that again. But overall, I think that Lily on the Veil is just one of these cards that it's always a powerful option, and the fact that it's going to be in Standard again is pretty insane. And for me, the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, like Rakdos mid range in Explorer is like the best deck, right? Like this
Oh yeah.
automatically bumps up so many of those decks. Like you can play this in Cat Oven, and it's still a
Totally.
pretty reasonable card.
I think there are a lot of people who are looking at their Obnix as the adversary and going like, do I really need this? Yeah, Liliana the Veil, like you're saying, this is going to be one of those cards day one. People are going to be cracking, like the moment it releases on Arena, there are people who are going to be crafting 4 of these with whatever Mythic Wild cards they can scrounge together. Like 100%. It's slotting into so many decks. Yeah, whether you play Explorer, Historic, Standard, freaking Alchemy, I have no doubt Liliana the Veil is going to be a powerhouse in all of
Hmm.
those decks. Because by the time you're dropping it, I mean, if you're on the play, you're dropping it on your opponent's turn 2. And the -2, target player sacrifices a creature. There's a really good chance they only have one creature if they have one creature at all. And then if they don't, a +1 of forcing them to discard a card. And if you have cards that are, that you don't mind discarding, if you have Lily in your deck, you probably have some idea of what you're going to be dumping. You can be discarding cards with flashback. You can be discarding like reanimation targets. You can do all kinds of stuff. As a reanimator player myself, I'm stoked to see this card hitting Standard. Like she is going to be a staple in pretty much everything I'm running. Um, like, yeah, no,
This and
and as
Meathook are
somebody
like best friends, right? Like the
totally.
black deck's already made. You play Graveyard Trespasser,
Mm-hmm.
Meathook, you can play this. Like I
Well,
said, the
yeah,
Sorin,
you got
the
Lily of the
Despair,
Veil,
Invoke
Meathook.
Despair, right? You're just blowing people
Yep. Oh
out,
my
like,
goodness, Invoke Despair is insane, and
and
that's
it's
not
good
going
against the
anywhere.
Liliana too. You can make them sack
Mm-hmm.
their Lily, like it's.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny. Going into this rotation, I remember thinking like, okay, at least the mono black control deck is going to be taking some hits. Because they're going to be losing blood on the snow. They're going to be losing, cards like Baleful Mastery. Not that you see that everywhere, but like Soul Shatter. They're going to be losing, um,
Some discard
you know,
spells.
some of the discard spells. Like they're going to be losing some heat. Hive of the Eye Tyrant is also going to be
Hmm.
rotating. So like, okay, this is going to be like this mono black deck that we know now is not really going to be a thing anymore. But now they're putting Liliana the Veil as well as a couple of other really powerful black cards that we're going to be getting into today. And so it's going to be changing, but I don't think mono black control is going to be leaving the standard meta anytime soon.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
this is folks, this is a top 3 card of the set.
Mm-hmm.
This is a
Oh,
card
easy.
that we could even put as number 1, depending on what the
Yeah.
rest of the set looks like. Honestly, I mean, this is a
What
card
what we've seen
that,
so far, you can make a solid argument
yeah, you can make a
that it
target
is the
argument.
number
This is
one
number
card
1. Yeah,
already.
and
Yep.
this, we talked about it like on our podcast. I think I don't remember if we actually talked about it on the cast, but I made kind of like I talked about to you before, like what would you consider to be like modern Power 9? And at one
Mm.
point, you could say Liliana was part of that
Yep.
because it really made Jund and some of these other mid-rangey decks like existent. I'll just
Totally.
discard a Lingering Souls of Liliana and then flash it back. Now I got some blockers for it, right? Now we keep
Mhm.
protecting Liliana until we can get to that ultimate or essentially just grind you out of the game where you're losing all the cards, you're sacking your permanent, your creatures. Yeah, this
Oh,
card, like,
sure.
it's so iconic and it's so powerful. It's just crazy that it's back in standard. It
Yeah.
really is,
Well,
you know?
and I can totally see in like looking at the modern Jund deck, kind of that boomer Jund that we talk about. I mean, turn 2 Tarmogoyf into turn 3 Lily of the Veil, uptick, both players discard cards. The Tarmogoyf is just boop boop boop. Like, and
Yeah.
I incredible. Like, I can see why that deck was powerful. Like, it makes sense. And yeah,
Yeah.
this card was just a key piece of that.
Downtick Lily,
Absolutely.
next turn uptick, replay another Lily. Now you sack another creature. And then now my Goyf gets even bigger, you know? It's just
Oh,
like
dude, the savage. Yeah.
it's out of control. I mean, you're gonna see this card. This is a card
Mm-hmm.
that for anybody who's new to the game over the last like 5, 6, almost like 10 years is how long Innistrad's almost been out, right?
Right. Yeah, it's been a minute. Well,
It's
and
been
I'll
a
be honest,
minute.
like I haven't played with Liliana the Veil because of the timing when I was taking because
Oh,
I
okay.
started way back in 2003. So I have skull clamps and Sensei's divining tops and all this crap that I'm like totally enamored with and I have a lot of thoughts about, but I took a long break. And
Hmm.
in there includes when Innistrad dropped. So I missed the first go round. And so a lot of these great cards that people are losing their mind about, I'm just stoked. And like much like a lot of our viewers, I have no doubt are stoked as well because I'm gonna get a chance to actually play with this card because everyone was telling me how amazing it was. And like I can see that it's very good. And there's no question. You look at it and you know, okay, for 3 mana, you're getting a lot of good stuff here, no question.
Oh yeah.
But like I haven't really had that moment because you know the moment when you're playing with a really good card for the first time and you go, "Holy crap, it does that!" You know when you like
Like,
you
yeah, that
really put
card's
it.
powerful.
Whoa! Like when the engine clicks for that first time and you're like, "Oh, oh here we go."
Rafine. I'll
Like
never forget
yes.
him. I'm telling you that I was like, that card's busted. And then the
Mm-hmm.
first time you play with it, you're like, yeah, this card is messed up.
Dude, the first time you swing with like 3 things with a Rafine down and your hand, you just draw 3 cards and then just, oh my god, it feels great. Yeah, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah, it
exactly.
starts to get out of
Exactly.
control.
Like you look at the card, you know it's good, but when you play with it, it's a whole other, like you get it. I haven't had that moment with Lily of the Veil yet, but I'm really excited that I'm going to get to. Yeah.
So our next card is actually quite a few cards, if you will, and
Mm-hmm.
it's actually some more reprints, which is quite surprising. I wasn't actually expecting these type of reprints. Like before, I feel like whenever we get some reprints, it's usually like a couple commons and uncommon, maybe like a shout out to like the first time we were on a plane that we're returning to. But this time, Ham, we're actually not only getting hit with Liliana, but we're also
Mm-hmm.
getting hit with some Painlands.
Yeah, buddy. Dude, I am so stoked for the Painlands. And this makes perfect sense on a lot of levels. For one, it is not uncommon for standard sets to come along with a rare land cycle that can produce multiple mana. Usually dual lands, but we saw in like Streets of New Capenna, we had the triomes, well, they're the triomes in air quotes. Zeator's Proving Grounds and Spar's Headquarters and all that jazz. The Tri-lands. And so I was fully expecting there to be some rare dual lands. And the last time we were on Dominaria 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever that was, we got check lands where they enter untapped if you control another land of the type or one of the two types that
Hmm.
their mana their colors produce. So or that produces their colors. This time around, so I was expecting we might get check lands back into standard. Cool, that would have been fine. But they decided to go with the Painlands instead. These lands are fantastic. They enter untapped.
No matter what.
No matter what, they're just entering untapped regardless. Doesn't matter how many other lands you have. Doesn't matter what types of other lands you have. They just enter untapped. And they can always tap to add a colorless. So if you have a lot of colored mana sources, they can just be colorless. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you do need a colored mana source, for example, like there's Yavimaya Coast, which is one of the first ones I ever found. It's the Simic one. It taps for green and blue. But when you tap it for green or blue, it deals 1 damage to you. And there's a whole sequence of these. And I gotta say, I am in love with this. And the reason that it fits so perfectly, you may note the name, and this is true of all of them, Yavimaya Coast.
Very
Yavimaya,
Dominaria.
it's on Dominaria. Like you can't get around it.
Hmm.
And it's true of all of them. They all have locations that are Dominaria. Like some of them we might be able to scrub and like do something, maybe make them fit. But like Yavimaya is Yavimaya. It's a forest on Dominaria, period. It just is. There's no way around it. There's no way that you could transplant that onto any other plane unless, I mean, I know Phyrexia tries to bring, anyway, but, you know, planter overlays aside, that's not a thing. And so it makes
Hmm.
sense for this set to be in Dominaria, and it's coming in at a time when we need additional fixing in Standard.
Yeah, it
Like,
actually
we
makes
just
it so
do.
that like you're you know, you don't have to worry about maybe running as many triomes as you want to on those
Mm-hmm.
3-color decks. Like you won't be so slow out of the gate. Like yeah, you'll take some damage for it, and that could end up maybe making a difference in the aggro matchup. But at the end of the day, most of your other matchups, it's not going to matter because you're going to get the cards you need right on time. Just like you said,
Mm-hmm.
like it comes into play untapped. It could help fill in like the gap. Maybe like you need some additional fixing for like your broker deck. Maybe you need some
Mm-hmm.
additional fixing for your cabaret deck. Like however you want to go. Like there's going to be at least one of these lands for each of those. And then I would guess that the rest of the cycle is going to be in Brothers War. We'll probably see the last 4 there. You know, I mean, I'm just as you were talking, I was reading like the flavor text of these. I mean, these are so
Mm-hmm.
like when these cards first came out back in the day, like you know, they were like a big deal.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, they were like some quote unquote dual lands that came into play untapped, and yeah, like you had to take some damage, but they added the colors you needed, and
It's
you
worth
know
it.
you're gonna see
Mm-hmm.
these. You're gonna play these. These cards are worth crafting. Every single time you see cards like these, you know, not only that, but what's really cool about when they reprint cards like these is that they enter historic, they enter explorer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's gonna be a great way to be able to use these lands and help fix a lot of other decks that wouldn't necessarily have the fixing available right away.
Absolutely. Well, and that's a great call out too, because these lands have been phenomenal pieces in some of the older formats for budget players. You know, if you need budget dual lands, like for commander decks, for example, the Painlands have always been a great go-to. Like if you can't afford shocks and fetches, you know, get some Painlands. Because they will give you what you need. They're not quite as good as some of the other ones, but at the end of the day, it'll get the job done. You know, these aren't typed is another thing to keep in mind. So like they don't have the basic land types, so that's relevant, especially with another mechanic that they're bringing back in domain, like that cares about basic land types. So that's a
Right.
thing. Cards that fetch. I mean, it's rotating out of standard, but binding the old gods, for example, that can fetch a forest. You know, can't grab one of these, so that's relevant. So yeah, they're not amazing, like as far as just dual lands go in the game, but they're fitting a very important role in the current standard because one of the things that I have found is 2 drops are really difficult to hit right now because if you are building.
Pathways.
Yes, if you're building, yeah. Oh, pathways leaving exactly. Pathways fit that role. Because if you're building a 3-color deck, for example, whatever 3 colors it might be, which there is incentive to do that. Like if you want to play Rafine, if you want to be playing, like Jund right now is actually in a really strong place with Fight Ring and
Mm-hmm.
Shakedown Heavy, Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Like there are a lot of pieces, and you kind of want to put them together to see what you can do, right? And one thing I found is trying to hit a Blood Tithe Harvester, for example. It's a 3/2, but it costs a black and a red. Trying to hit that on turn 2 right now is really difficult if you've got a handful of the dual lands that are available to you. Because, like, if you have tap lands and slow lands, so, okay, I can have my Triome on 1, but then I'm going to play a Haunting Ridge on 2, or Haunted
Ugh.
Ridge on 2, and it enters
No.
tapped.
No.
So I'm not
Yeah,
hitting
it
my 2-drop.
hurts. It hurts,
It
Ham.
sucks. Like, yeah, it
I've
hurts really
felt that
badly.
pain. I've felt
Mm-hmm.
that pain. In your aggro deck, it's definitely not what you want, but these,
Oh, it's bad,
you're
yeah.
right, these add like the stability for you to be able to hit all your cards on time. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
that these, in all honesty, I might be wrong about this, but I think that this is going to be the best that the Painlands have been since they were printed.
Probably, yeah.
I think that with like this standard, with these in for like almost like 2 years, um, yeah, it's gonna be great. I think that these are gonna be phenomenal all throughout. Especially like I said, once we get to Brothers War, we'll probably finish the cycle out, and then we'll have all
Mm-hmm.
10 in standard. Which it's been a while since we've had this much mana fixing. Ham. I mean, 3-color decks, 4-color decks, 5-color decks, have whatever you want to name it. Like it's gonna be a lot more viable. Maybe expect to see some more Kami War. I don't even know. Like
Yep.
I just feel like these really add so much more dimension to so many different decks. I can't talk enough about them. They're beautiful. Their flavor text is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. It
Oh yeah,
feels like some old school magic, and yeah, it's just great. It's
yeah.
solid.
Oh, And you're absolutely also just the art on all of them is
Oh,
breathtaking. Like
phenomenal.
every last one,
And
they nailed it.
yeah, it looks just like the old arts, but just like
Hmm.
updated.
Yeah.
It's so weird. They just nailed it. They did such a great job with like specifically these last two cards that we've talked about, quote unquote, the Painland cycle and Liliana the Veil. It just like
Hmm.
both of these just feel so good. As like a Magic player, it's really cool to be able to see these back into standard and being able to play them now and like explore, and yeah, it's just really cool.
Oh yeah.
So we got some other cards on the menu here. We're gonna get to them. Our first one being the Ravenman. So this one is kind of weird to me at first. It took me a while to kind of read all these because they were on the stream. So Ravenman, colorless, black, 2/1, legendary creature, human wizard. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card this turn, create a 1/1 black bird creature token with flying and it can't block. 4, 3 colorless and a black. Tap it. Each opponent discards a card. Activate only as a sorcery. So it definitely has that EDH type vibe.
Hmm.
And so it's decent on stats. It's a 2 mana 2/1, sure. But the fact that like each end step, if a player discarded a card, you get a 1/1 bird, so you can discard cards yourself. Maybe fill up
Yep.
your graveyard, anything like that. Like it's just good. I feel like this card, we'll see. Like the fact that it continually can make more flying creatures and it's each end step, there's a chance for this card to actually get played compared to help me with the name, but it's a card that made a 2/2 with decay, but then you only got to make the decayed if you didn't have one out. I can't remember, but it's from the Midnight Hunt. It's from
Yes.
Innistrad
Was that
block.
dying to serve where you discarded
No, it was a creature. It was like Jareth or
Oh, okay.
Jedith or something. I can't remember what the name of
Oh,
it was. You know what I'm talking about though. It's a 2 mana 1/1, and then at the beginning of the end step, you make a decayed zombie 2/2, and but only if you don't have one. But this one, Ravenman is kind of like better than that, and it also has better stats. Like it's a two
Jadar.
mana two
That's the
one.
one.
What is it?
Yes. Jadar, Gulcaller of
Jadar.
Nephalia. Yes,
Yeah,
that guy. I
Jadar.
know
Yep,
exactly.
yep, yep,
Yes.
yep.
Yep, yep, yep.
Um,
But
this is
so
better. I think this
it
is a lot
is.
better. You get a lot more value. It's kind of like a young Pyromancer type effect.
Hmm. Well, and I think this card is going to be shockingly good. Like when you read it, you think, okay, I have to send 4 to make my opponents discard a card, and then it only triggers on my end step, and I only get 1 no matter how many opponents I have. If you're thinking EDH, all right, sure. But the truth is, the Raven Man's ability triggers every turn. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card this turn, create a 1/1 Blackbird creature token. Now, there are a couple of things that are around right now that just incidentally force players to discard cards. If you activate a blood token, you're discarding a card. You hit chapter 2 on Fable of the Mirror Breaker, somebody's discarding a card. You've got
Liliana the
Channel,
Veil.
Liliana the Veil, forcing your opponents to discard cards. Exactly.
Make a bird
But
token.
if you attack and your opponent uses a Ganjo or like Besaijo to hit one of your things, they just discarded that card.
Mm-hmm.
So boom, at the end of the turn, you're getting a Raven. So I have a feeling, or you're getting a Blackbird. At the end of what's going to happen a lot when Raven Man is on the field. Granted, he's a 2/1. He's going to die a lot too. But if Raven Man survives for 2 or 3 turns, your opponent is going to learn a very valuable lesson about prioritizing the removal to get rid of this guy. Because I think we have gotten into the habit of discarding cards in Magic and not thinking anything of it.
Getting that extra
And
value is huge, right?
mhm,
Like the fact that it's just like a 2-for-1 to 3-for-1 type effect, right? At that point, because you're getting a body, maybe you can use that body to cast your little chat.
yep,
You know what I mean? There's all kinds of
I
different
love little
things
shit. Yeah.
that you can do with uh, Raven Man. I think it's going to be strong. I think the only thing that'll hold it back at the end of the day is going to be the fact that another card that's in its colors, Meathook Massacre, kind of just beats it.
Yep.
Um,
Totally blows it up. Yeah.
but if that's not happening, then this card's great, and I mean you can just make them discard the hook before
Right.
they can potentially get you. So, and then maybe even grow your army with some other cards. I mean, I think there's some value with this card. I don't want to like leave it out. Obviously on it doesn't seem like it's doing anything crazy. It's like a very low impact incremental value card. But I expect to see it somewhere eventually, whether or not out
Hmm.
of the gates.
Yeah, it actually reminds me a lot of there's an uncommon from our last trip to Ravnica. I don't remember if it was Ravnica. I don't remember if it was City of Guilds or Allegiance, but there was a card called Murmuring Mystic where every time you cast an instant or sorcery, you created a 1/1 bird.
Hmm.
Now, granted, you had control over that. That was a little more easy to control than Ravenman necessarily. Although with Ravenman, if you have a bunch of cycling effects or channel effects, you can, you know, you do have some control. That does trigger off of you, but
Yeah.
it reminds me of that because Murmuring Mystic was like it's like a 2/5 for 5 or something like that. Like, the stat line is not great on it, but if you don't prioritize killing it, before you know it, you have 6 or 7 little bird tokens that are pecking away at you every single turn.
Hmm.
Like, it puts a very real clock on you, and I can see Ravenman doing something similar to that,
Yeah, 2 to 3
where
tokens. It's like a lingering
mhm.
souls. Like I think everybody kind of forgets about lingering souls. No one's really seen it for a very long time, and I think that the best thing that came close to it was like a hangerback walker, which just came out in the
Mm,
anthologies. I
yep.
think it was, or was it the anthologies, or was it in some of the other ones before? I know that I have 4 of them, but
It was introduced to Arena with the I believe, Explorer Anthology,
okay,
yeah. Mhm.
but hangerback like essentially makes an army of 1/1 flyers if you sacrifice it, and lingering souls pretty much did the same thing on just one card for 5 mana, 3 and then 2. Like you made a bunch of 1/1 flyers, and then eventually, before your opponent knows it, they're getting hit for 5 a turn or 4 a turn. I mean, that's like a 4 to 5 turn clock. So
Yeah,
I don't
adds
think
up
that's
fast.
anything to be like underestimating for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, and if they're it's one of those things like if yeah, you're right. Meat Massacre blows it out. Like, sweepers in general can deal with it,
Mm-hmm.
but if they're not running sweepers, like, you can have as much targeted removal in your hand as you want. I've got a ton of these birds. I don't care.
We'll
You
see
can pick
how
off
big the
one
can't
in here and
block
there.
is, right? I think that that's going to be
Hmm.
the most important part is like how bad is it that the birds can't block?
That is very significant.
Because you're
Yeah.
not getting like a essentially like a cat oven type effect where you can block,
Right.
use it. Instead, you're just hoping that maybe you make enough of them, or you have like a prosperous innkeepers or like a soul warden type effect where you gain some life whenever
Hmm.
one of the birds comes in.
Right.
But
That could
yeah,
be interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it could be good. Our next card is actually like a shout out to quite a popular EDH card, not necessarily a card. I don't remember if it ever got played in standard, maybe a few times, but Zur. So Zur is back. Zur, Eternal Schemer, white, blue, black for a 1/4 human wizard legendary. Flying. Enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, Hexproof. Colorless and a white, target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature in addition to its other types, has base power toughness, each equal to its mana value. So essentially like a Starfield and Nyx on a body, but you're not reanimating. Instead, you're giving like 3 relevant abilities of Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. Um, and then maybe turning one of your enchantments into, something that can beat some face. I actually like this card. It's weird because so runes is a deck, but it's not in these colors except for white,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
But I think that Hallowed Haunting is a card that I could actually see like 1 or 2 Zers fitting in where you maybe can control the board with some Banishing Light type effects, and then maybe you got your Hallowed Haunting out, you got a bunch of spirits, and then you start reanimating some of your
Hmm.
actual, or start animating some of your actual enchantments, and then they have Lifelink, Death Touch, Hexproof, and then on top of that, maybe that turns on your Hallowed Haunting for the finish, right? Gives everything flying, and then you just gain a bunch of
Yeah.
life, and all these crazy things happen. Like, I don't know. I think that this card on stats, this card is gonna have a hard time getting played with Rafine being in the format. I think that that's actually what
Mm.
it ends up coming down to. I think that this card is too specific of a deck for you to almost want to go for it. I could end up eating my own words. Maybe who knows? There's like some crazy or enchantment, non-or enchantment deck. But I think that at the end of the day, this card's competing with what I believe to be one of the best cards in standard, and it just feels too much like a EDH card. It really just doesn't feel like a standard card for me.
Hmm. I think it comes down to if there's going to be support for it because this archetype, like, I think comparing it to Rafine is fair because obviously they're both, flying Esper engines, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
Rafine wants you to go wide and Zur wants you to have enchantments. They're very different in what they're trying to do. But the fact that all enchantment creatures have Death Touch, Lifelink, Hexproof. I mean, there are some enchantment creatures in the format already. A lot of them have green though. It's part of the issue. Like, you want your Shigekis and um some of those creatures, you want
Mm-hmm.
to be running them with, in Bant or Selesnya, whereas Zur is clearly, obviously an Esper. So that is a bit of a challenge. I could definitely see this in older, like Doom Foretold style decks that are using things like Omen of the Sea, even Treacherous Blessing is
Mm-hmm.
those kind of cards that are these like 2, 3, 4 drops that give you some value when they enter the battlefield, and then being able to convert them into attackers all of a sudden that have Death Touch, Lifelink, and freaking Hexproof,
Yeah, it
like
can't even be
as long as Zer's
targeted.
on the field.
Yep.
That's pretty tight. Like you can do some neat things with that. So I think it's cool. I think you're right that in EDH it definitely pops. Like this definitely sings in like in a commander situation. Also, if you already have an EDH Zer deck, this just slots right in,
Oh yeah.
which which is something that I've seen a lot with the reimagining of older legends. That's one of the things that we see a lot in this set. There's a whole sequence of box toppers that are all reimagined legends. We've clearly seen, there's Zur as well as a number of other legendary creatures of yore that are very popular in Commander. Um, and the newer versions of them are in in the same colors and somehow support the older version. Like you can play
Mm-hmm.
them together and they actually work really well. I think that's neat. And Zer's a great example of that. So yeah, I think this is one of those cards that I'm going to try to build a deck around, and it's probably going to be a Hallowed Haunting deck.
Oh, Hell
One of the
Haunting's
first,
so good. It's such a
yeah,
strong card.
I want to see what I'm gonna want to do in that deck is hit Zur on 3, hit some kind of cheap early creatures. Spirit of Companion would definitely be in there. We'd have Zur on 3. I'd want to hit a Hallowed Haunting on 4, and then go with me here. This is a little crazy. Wiretapping on 5.
Man, talk about crazy. Ham, you're getting
Think
a little
about it.
nuts. You almost
Get a little
want
nuts.
Chisk Decaphile in there.
Yes.
So
Let's go.
that way you're just drawing a billion cards and then eventually you just win the game or
You win,
have
yeah,
other
with Fisk deck
alternatives.
file. But
Yeah.
the part of the thing with wiretapping, with the issue with that card is its high mana value.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to spend 5 for a Phyrexian Arena. That's just it's a terrible rate. Even if it doesn't, you don't lose life. It's still not worth it.
Yeah.
But Zur turning that into a 5/5 death touching lifelink hexproof. All of a
That's where
sudden,
you
that's a
want to be.
body your opponent's got to tangle with. That's something. So I don't know. Maybe it's silly jank, but it's silly jank that I'm gonna be trying for sure.
So
Yeah.
these last two cards are kind of been the same thing you're talking about, that theme of legendary creatures kind of getting a new look, and our next actual like 3 or 4 cards here is actually just that. The first one that we have here is Squee Dubious Monarch. 2 colorless, a red, legendary creature, Goblin Noble, haste. Whenever this card attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. You may cast this card from your graveyard by paying 3 colorless and a red, and exiling 4 other cards from your graveyard rather than paying its mana cost. So, yeah, I think that this card is kind of nuts. Like, on the play, this card is really strong. It's just a Den of the Bugbear.
Hmm.
And then, if it doesn't die, I mean, it has haste. It's probably going to connect. If it dies, you just get it back later in the game when you just have, like, a pile of cards in the graveyard. Like, if you can get 2 tokens off of this in a red deck, you probably feel pretty good. I don't... It could potentially be like a one of in some older formats, 1 to 2
Hmm.
of, but I feel like in standard, this card is probably going to be rocking it for red decks, right? At least
Yeah,
like
probably.
aggressive decks.
Like it's easy to look at this and think, it's a 2/2 for 3. Even with haste, is really that great. But you are attacking for 3 the turn it enters. That's very,
Mm-hmm.
across 2 bodies. That's very relevant. And I find it interesting too. There are certain mechanics throughout Magic that they just refuse to make evergreen or even deciduous, as they call it. Um, but they just include 1 or 2 of here and there. Like we see it with Surveil all the time. Like E2 Extinction had Surveil on it, but it wasn't called Surveil. Like, why not? And here we have Squee with Escape.
Yeah,
That
pretty
ability is
much.
Escape. It
It's
just
just
is.
like a Crocstar, like an Uro, pretty much.
Hmm.
Just
Yeah, it's
exile some
Escape.
extra cards in the graveyard and get it back. Keep
Yeah,
rocking.
it's Escape for 3 in a red and 4 cards.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it is. Which is fine. Like Escape's a fine mechanic. It's kind of it's a different take on Flashback where you can do it multiple times. You can hit permanents, but like it's cool. Like I like Escape. I have no problem with it. It's just kind of silly they don't call it Escape. But this is also nice. In those red decks, like you're saying, it does provide the power that you need. Being able to swing for 3 on turn 3, plus whatever else you've got on the board is exactly what you want to be doing. So that's nice. And then we're in a situation where we've already got Thundering Raiju, we've got Kumano faces Kakazan, we've got even Storm Tamer. These aren't leaving
The
the format.
dragon
So
that the first red dragon that was spoiled from Dominaria as well, that could potentially be in
yes,
this red
Shivan
deck.
Devastator could
Yep.
absolutely be like 1 or 2 of in that deck, 100%. So I believe there will be a mono red aggro deck, and Squee could fit in that. But the other nice thing about Squee having Escape is, as we all know, anybody who's tried to play those lightning fast aggro decks, they run out of gas in the late game. If it gets to turn like 6, 7, 8, especially if your opponent hits the right removal, gets a couple blockers, or hits that sweeper, especially like a meat hook that gains a bunch of life, like that a lot of the time is just backbreaking for you because you're dead on board. You got nothing left. Now, Squee, at least you can get something. So if your opponent hits a depopulate and the board is wiped out, or that dreaded meat hook massacre, so okay, the whole board is empty. Next turn, you now have a graveyard because you had creatures that are now dead. You can then pull Squee back and start cracking again, even if your hand is empty. So it can help chip in for those last couple points of damage in a situation that would otherwise, and on top of that, it grows over time because you're getting additional goblins each attack. So each turn, Squee attacks effectively, again across multiple bodies, effectively attacks for 3 the first turn that it comes down, effectively attacks for 4 the next, and 5 the next, because you're getting those additional bodies. So and if you have an anthem effect like a wedding announcement or something like that, it gets even more insane. So I dig
Yeah,
this. This little guy's great.
it's
Yeah,
like an
and I
enabler
love
and a
Squee.
payoff type card, right? Like
Hmm.
it's really good with the Ravenman. If you're trying to discard some cards, you discard the
Yep.
Squee, and then you can get it back later, and then now you have a bird plus the Squee. It's just a really strong card on the play. Like
Hmm.
on the draw, maybe depending on what you're playing
Yeah,
against,
not
maybe not as
ideal on
much,
the
but
draw. On the play, this card's
on the
great.
play, yeah,
Yeah.
this card's gonna be like a house. I think that, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't see like 3 or 4 of, because you can just play more
Hmm.
and then just keep feeding your other ones when you need to get them back, which is kind of like
Hmm.
a squeeze type thing, just to be able to like keep
Right.
coming back. But I don't know. I expect this to be played in standard. Other formats, I'm a little bit more skeptical about. If I see it, I won't be surprised.
Right.
It's like you know, there's so many of these cards: Legion War Boss, Rabble Master.
Hmm.
Um, these are the types of cards that we normally see. Um, doing those effects in the past, and yeah, I think that this card definitely has a chance to be up there and get played quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, and if you can compare it to a card that we're actually going to be losing out of standard that doesn't see a ton of play right now, but fit that role really nicely in Relic Robber. It was a 2/2 Goblin Rogue with haste for 3. And when it connected with the opponent, they created a 0/1 construct that pinged them every turn,
Yeah, and they
and
couldn't block.
it couldn't
Yep.
block. So it's one of those things where it's like, sure, if you can sacrifice this creature, then you're fine. But if you can't, it's going to keep eating away at you. And I feel like Squee is doing something very similar here, except you get the goblin on attack. You don't have to connect with it, which is really nice.
Against control, this card's a nightmare because they
Oh
have to.
yeah.
It's a win condition by itself.
Hmm.
You're right. Like it slowly gets out of control. You can just kill them with just this card alone, and then it
Right.
comes back. Like you go like 2 drop, 3 drop is this, and then you can just keep attacking with both of those cards until your opponent decides they want to deal with your stuff, and then eventually you can play out the rest of your game plan. I think it's really strong.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely expect
Yeah.
to
And
see this card.
this is one of those, when I first read it, I was like, it's okay, I guess. And especially like with Squee not being able to cast it from exile like you could with Squee. I believe Goblin Nabob you could actually cast even if it was exiled.
Yeah, that card was
So
insane.
it's nuts, right? But so this Squee not being able to, but that one didn't have haste if I'm not mistaken. But in any event,
Yeah,
this one not being able, like, so if you exile this with March of the Really Light or something of that nature, or Wandering Emperor, then it's gone forever, which does suck and is kind of an. But at the same time, that's just a testament to how sweet Squee is as far as like lore is concerned.
mm-hmm.
That like in previous editions, Exile couldn't even stop this freaking guy. Yeah, I love anything with this character in it. I think he's great, and I think this is a really cool card. That the more I look at it, the more I like it. It's going to see play for sure.
Yeah, it's super awesome. So our
Mhm.
next card is yet again another legend here that we're giving an old school shout out to. So we have Soul of Windgrace, colorless, black, red, green For a 5/4 cat avatar, whenever this card enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from the graveyard onto the battlefield tapped in your control. 1 green, discard a land, you gain 3. Red, colorless, discard a land, draw a card. Black, 2 colorless, discard a land. This card gains indestructible until in a turn, and tap it. I just don't know about this card. Like, you know, I always want to build this deck that has, like, 30 lands in it, and all these really cool things happen, but I'm not completely sold on this card. I think it's really going to need EH yet again. In terms of, like, competitive Magic, like, we're talking about, like, tournaments, the MTGA ladder. Yeah, I don't know. It's okay. It has the potential to be, like, a really crazy strong card, but then you also need lands for it to be good. And if you don't have lands, then it's not really that powerful. But then if you have too many lands, then you're going to get punished because you're flooded out. So, or, you're spending your mana every turn to just do one of these, which isn't really... I'm not... I just think it's like an EDH card. Maybe that's just me.
And I think, and again, this kind of fits into what I was saying earlier. If you have the Lord Windgrace Planeswalker, like, commander deck, if that's one of your EDH decks, this deck just slots right in, or this card just slots right into it. Like, 100%, it fits perfectly with that style. Because the Lord Windgrace Planeswalker wants you to be sacrificing lands to get value, and lands entering your graveyard triggers stuff. And so Soul of Windgrace does all of those things that we want to see. So, all right, neat. There are a couple of things about this card that I actually really dig it. I think this card is onto something, because it's a 5-power Jund creature that's going to be entering into the fight rigging meta. So I think that's something on its own right there.
Sure,
But on top of,
I can agree with that.
is what it is. But on top of that, one detail that I wish I remembered who posted it, but I saw somebody on Twitter pointed out, this does not say your graveyard. Whenever Soul of Windgrace enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. You can steal your opponent's lands with this. That's tasty. Like, there's something there. But on top of that, if you have, that's okay. I don't know if that's going to be a big deal, but it could be useful. On top of that, this is also a great way to be able to discard cards for value, and you can discard these cards at instant speed to trigger Ravenman. I mean, there is a discard theme already. We're seeing it. And so that's something. On top of that, if we're discarding lands to satisfy Liliana of the Veil, Windgrace can pull them back from our graveyard, so we can just take advantage of those.
Yeah, triggers on attack. I think that's the number one thing that's
nice.
Makes me sway. Like, you're kind of convincing me, at least, is that you can... just keep pitching your lands, and then whenever you attack, you're just going to get them back no matter what, so you're still going to have a ton of mana, and if you need to, maybe you'll have an extra land where you'll get to give this indestructible so it doesn't die from the attacks or blocks or whatever.
Well, and on top of that, if I'm not mistaken, if you have 5 mana lying around, you can cast Soul of Windgrace when the triggered ability is on the stack. You can then activate that first ability, chuck a land card, gain 3 life, pull the land from your graveyard onto the battlefield. Like, there's some cool interchanges with this. And the potential, if you have a lot of lands in your deck, the amount of ramp that this card can give you is absurd. We also have a card that has not seen a ton of play right now that came out in Crimson Vow, if I'm not mistaken. I get Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow mixed up.
Are you going to say the Cultivator?
Yes, Cultivator Colossus.
Man, that was the first card that came to my head when I read this. I was like, well, I could just play the Cultivator deck, and then, this card can ramp you to the Cultivator, or you just have like 1,000 lands in your hand, and you discard them.
If you're sitting on 35, 36 lands in your deck, Cultivator Colossus is going to draw you all the cards in the world. You can have freaking Titan of Industry in that deck too, because why not? I mean, like, it could get pretty gnarly, and it's one of those things where if it pops, that deck is going to be insane. But if super fast aggro and Orzhov or Black control is the meta, that deck's probably going to be a non-starter completely. But I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by Jund Land Ramp. I'm cool with it.
We'll definitely see what ends up happening with the old Soul of Windgrace. Interesting card. So our next card is another shout out to some legends. Soul CANARD the Tainted, 2 colorless, blue, black, red for a legendary creature, Elemental Demon. Love to see that.
Mm-hmm.
5/5. This card is very, very interesting. Once again, feels very EDH, but there's
Yep.
actually 3 modes of this card that are kind of nuts. At the beginning of your end step, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Draw a card. Each
Love it.
opponent loses 2 and you gain 2. This
Solid.
card deals 3 damage to up to one other target creature or planeswalker. Exile this card, then return it to the battlefield under an opponent's control. So that last part is obviously rough, because then
Mm-hmm.
your opponent will get to do all those same things back to you. But
With a
those,
5/5 body on
yeah, with
on
the
board.
5/5
Yeah.
body, yep. But those first 3 abilities just seem so good, Ham. How do you feel about this card?
I
I
love
don't
it.
know.
I love this card. I'm 100% on board. Let's go. Because I am never, ever, 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 under any circumstances, going to allow that 4th one to trigger. Ever. Because you can get around that in so many ways. I mean, obviously, we're in Grixis here. We have blue, we have black, we even have red. Red's not really super relevant here, but that's okay. In black, we have sacrifice effects.
Okay.
Obviously. If we can sacrifice Soul Canard before that last one triggers, great. We can just, get it off the board. Fine.
Yeah.
However, in blue is really where stuff starts getting saucy, because when a permanent is exiled and it is then returned to the battlefield, it's considered a brand new permanent, meaning all of these resets. So Planner Incision is a card that is still legal, that no one is playing right now because it doesn't really have a home. It is an instant for 1 and a blue, exile target creature you control, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it.
Okay.
So if Solkanar survives for 3 turns, which is already kind of I mean,
It's a tough ask.
it's a tough ask. Exactly, like a 5/5 living that long
In
on a
today's
board
Magic, yeah,
in
today's Magic.
today's standard or explorer, that's asking a lot. But if it does, if it manages to stick around and you're running like a Grixis kind of mid range or Grixis control shell where this is your finisher, um, then you could just blank it or even bounce it with something like Fading Hope. You just bounce it back, play it out again. You're starting from scratch. You hit it with a planner incision. It just resets. Like, I think it's going to be very easy to abuse this. And in older formats, you have things like Thassa Deep Dwelling that can blink it every turn, meaning you could just pick whatever modes you want every single turn.
Ugh.
Like, there are ways around it, and I think there are ways to abuse it, and I think people are going to be abusing it in those ways.
All
One thing
right.
actually that is mildly unfortunate, its mana value is 5, so the Garuda deck with Thassa Deep Dwelling, which would like really want this, can't really use it. Like, it doesn't line up nicely with that deck.
Uh,
I know, right? Such a bummer, but it is what it is.
uh,
Yeah, if it
I
costs 6, like, let's go, but no.
I think the first half of that card is really strong, though. I agree
Hmm.
with you on those first 3. Like you get to play this and then just automatically bolt something. It's like this kind of overcharged Kavoo, and then afterwards
Right?
you can just be like, all right, yeah, Siege Rhino you a little bit, and then you're like, all right, I'll draw a card, and then all right, response to the last ability, I'll blink it or sacrifice it to any of my many cards and get some kind
Hmm.
of like really good effect out of it, and then play another one, and then now your opponent has to deal with it again, and then every end step it's triggering, and yeah, I mean it's mythic for a reason. I think that
Yeah.
it has a potential to be really, really strong.
Hmm. I mean, I love that it does have a downside. And it was funny. Melissa DeToro actually was talking about this on the Wizard stream, and they actually modeled this card somewhat off of Tainted Pact, because it has that last ability where you lose the game, but it does like 2 or 3 really awesome things prior to that. And it's kind of like that, where it's like, okay, sure, because the truth is, like, handing your opponent a 5/5 elemental demon, whatever. But the problem is, they're going to be able to bolt your stuff. They're going to be able to draw cards. They're going to be able to, drain you. Like, that's the part that you don't want to be giving to your opponent. And yeah, so yeah, I think you need to build around this. I don't think this is just, oh, I have Grixis, let's just drop Sulkanar in there.
Yeah, it's not
You
like
can't
that.
do that. You need to have a plan for how you're going to work with this card. But the upside's there. Yeah.
For sure. Our next card here, legendary creature, human artificer. We have JOYRA making a comeback. Ageless Innovator, a 2/3. I actually think this card's kind of nuts. I think
Mm-hmm.
that if it's like left unchecked, it gets out of control. So it's tap, put 2 ingenuity counters on it. Then you may put an artifact card with mana value extra less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the number of ingenuity counters on this card. So, yeah, I mean, you play it, and then the next turn you're like, all right, essentially it's adding 2 mana. You get to play a 2-drop. And then the
Mm-hmm.
following turn you get to tap it again and play a 4-drop. You know what I think this card's really good with, Ham? That I think
Hmm.
is like rather weird, but kind of cool at the same time. It's really good with Karn because you
Oh
can
yes,
essentially down tick Karn and then just tap her to just play it, whatever
yep,
you got, and then the next turn you can play something bigger, and then the next turn you get to play something bigger, and then just
yeah.
like keep that going. I think that this card has the potential to either make new types of decks or
Hmm.
maybe add to a strategy that we're not really thinking about right now.
No, I completely agree. And right now in Explorer and Historic, we do see like a mono brown artifact deck that's using all like colorless utility lands with things like Forsaken Monument, Karn the Great Creator. A lot of the time they're ramping up to Ugin. That's something that we see a lot in that deck because why
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't you? If it, um, but at the same time, you're exactly right. Karn the Great Creator being able to fetch a Mystic Forge out of the graveyard and Jor being able to just drop it for free, and then you get to cast off the top of your library or go in to grab, just whatever big artifact you have in
Ooh,
your
Mystic Forge, right? Isn't is
Mystic
that the
Forge is
one where you get
awesome.
to play stuff off the top? Yeah.
You can play artifacts and colorless spells off the top of your library,
Mm-hmm.
but so all of a sudden, like in a deck that's otherwise full of colorless artifacts, I think JOYRA absolutely could fit in that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is weird because she's two colors, so it's obvious like it's an interesting cost as far as the deck building is concerned to put her in because you have to then completely rework the mana base, completely change. But then all of a sudden, things like Mox Amber all of a sudden start working. Again, we're talking older formats. Um, in recent standards, it has been difficult to make artifacts work because they just don't really see the support. Um, and I would not be surprised. And right now, if you look at like equipment that's out there, if you look at artifacts that are really relevant, a lot of them are actually going to be rotating out. Like Ball of the Skyclaves comes to mind, and like the auto equip equipment from Zendikar would be amazing with Joyra.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that could be absolutely just bananas crazy. But unfortunately, we're not going to have access to those in standard at the same time. So I think if Joyra is going to make an impact on standard, it really comes down to are the artifacts good enough? We need to see good artifacts. And I would not be surprised if in Dominaria United, frankly, they aren't. However, the next set we have coming out is Brothers War.
Oh yeah.
And if there are not some incredibly bomb artifacts in Brothers War, they will have missed the boat so hard on that set, it's not even funny.
Or the
Like,
machine set. There's gonna be
exactly.
artifacts
We're
coming
gonna
either
have
way.
artifacts coming up.
Yeah, there's gonna
100%.
be something strong. I think
So
you're gonna see this card
don't
at some
yeah.
point. This isn't a
Exactly.
card that right out the gates
Yeah.
you might not see. Maybe the right card isn't available right now, but I think that eventually this is a card that has the potential. I'm just gonna say it right now. I know people don't like the B word. We haven't had a banned card in standard. We haven't had a clean slate in standard for like 5 years since
Right.
2017. But I think once everything rotates, we won't have any cards on the ban list. But I think
Hmm.
Joyra is a card that kind of scares me. Where if left unchecked,
Yeah.
so on turn, yeah, you play it on turn 2, and then by turn 5, you're playing 6 drops for free,
Yeah.
and
Well,
then
and that's the
eight
other thing.
drops. Like it just
This
gets out
doesn't
of control.
it doesn't require any mana. So you play Joyra on turn 2. On turn 3, you can play whatever the hell you want and then tap her and just get a 2-drop for free
Mm-hmm.
if you have the artifact in your hand. I
Play a
mean, that's
spyglass, sit at
dope.
their hand.
Mm-hmm. And on top of
Yeah.
that, like we're also in a situation where Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh, is legal as well,
Ooh, that's right. Yep.
and there are things like Reality Heist that has affinity for artifacts. I mean, there are some support cards in Standard for for an artifact deck, and maybe some of the vehicles like Bank Buster. Like that's Joyride like on turn 2 you tap, or turn 3 you can play a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, tap Joyride, just hit a Bank Buster.
Yeah, it's
Why
really really
not?
strong.
Like all of a sudden you're getting 5 mana worth of value on turn 3 right away. I mean, in the right deck, Jorah is a phenomenal ramp spell. Like she's a phenomenal mana dork, really, in a way. But even then, you're not casting these spells. You're putting them right onto the battlefield, so they're difficult to interact with. It's like really cool. I think, and you can do it at instant speed. Is the other thing that you can't ignore that. So if there are good artifact creatures at like the 2 or 4 drop or those kind of things, all of a sudden they could be showing up as blockers out of nowhere that your opponent is not going to see coming.
This card's messed up, man. I'm telling you, I'm
Yeah.
worried. I'm worried about this card.
So what I fully expect
Uh,
JOYRA to not make any waves for the first couple of months, and then Brothers War is going to drop, and there's going to be some combo with this card that we are all going to be groaning about.
yeah, something that
Because
you can do at instant
it's going to
speed.
be
That's just
amazing.
nuts. Yeah.
It's going to be absolutely bonkers, and we are all going to get sick of it really fast. I guarantee it. Like, I don't know what that is yet, but we'll find out. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely be on the lookout for JOYRA,
Yeah,
Ageless Innovator.
and this is one of those cards. Keep this in mind as we look at any artifacts going forward. Just be aware. Like, JOYRA is a way to cheat them out really fast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So next card is actually one that everyone was very, very excited about. And there is actually still a lot of hype on this card. I like it a lot. We're gonna get into it here. So Shieldred the Apocalypse, 2 colorless, 2 black, legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, 4/5 Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So overall, card has good stats, right? 4 mana, 4/5 Death Touch. It has 2 cool abilities, like whenever you draw, so every turn you're gonna get to at least gain 2. And on your opponent's turn, every one of their turns are gonna at least lose 2. So like up front, it seems really strong on stats, and the abilities are decent. I just, for 4 mana, I'm not sure. It doesn't, like, the thing that detracts me away from this card is no comes into play effect. As crazy as that sounds, listen, if it was a Thoughtseize on a stick, I know this sounds absurd, but hear me out. If it did something, you know, when it came into play, if there was like any additional upside, maybe like when this card comes in, sacrifice a creature, and you draw a card, and then whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. So then that way, no matter what, it came in, gained you life, and then, you know, it could have been a May. It didn't have to be like you have to sacrifice a creature. It could have been like a May ability. Like, I just feel like there's one more thing missing on this to really. I could be wrong. I really could be wrong about this card, but I just feel for 4 mana, you just want like this bomb card. You know, that's just how I always really feel. And for 4 mana, I think it's really, really powerful. And it stops a lot of mono green stuff in standard, but that deck probably doesn't exist as much as it used to. It's maybe a little bit too slow against aggro sometimes, where you're not getting that life gain until your following turn. Don't get me wrong, 4/5 is good, but if they're able to just kill it, like I don't know. I feel like you're not getting any value off this card. I feel like it's a really strong card in EDH, and it could potentially have its place somewhere, maybe in the sideboard, or maybe in some deck we'll end up playing it, but I don't know. I really want to. I don't know. For me personally, I'm not like 100%.
That's fair.
I think I need someone to maybe convince me on it more. I think in the right metagame, yes, this card could probably be really strong. It's a 4/5. 5 toughness is huge. It stops a lot of 4/4s. Death Touch just is always a relevant ability. But at the same time, I just, like I said, your 4 mana cards, like, you always want it to be like a game ender, and this isn't like a game ending card. This is like, compared to Wandering Emperor. I'm just gonna make that comparison.
Sure.
Straight up. We'll make that comparison because they're both 4 mana. They're not the same color, but they're both 4 mana. So, comparison to like Wandering Emperor, I mean, what would you rather do? Like, what deck wants to play Shieldred in a competitive setting? You're not playing this in Rakdos. Like in Explorer, you're not playing this. You got Kalidas.
No.
You have Chandra is way better than this card. Soren's even better than this card. Like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
Do you kind of see what I'm saying? I think it's a really cool card, and it's cool. It's powerful. I like it a lot, but for competitive like tournament Magic, I have a hard time believing that we're going to see a lot of this card. We'll see it somewhere, but not like a ton.
I think that's fair. I think this card is going to be as good or as bad as card draw effects are in whatever format you're trying to slot this into. Like, one combo that Shieldred actually works really nicely with right now that's going to be standard legal is Fellstinger. You know, that's a card where it enters, you sacrifice, target player loses 2 life and draws 2 cards. So if you target your opponent, they lose 6 life with that. Like, and they
Oh,
draw 2 cards, but
brutal.
if you're just doming them for the win, you don't care.
Yeah.
You know, so cool. It's a neat trick. I don't know if that's good or not, but it's something. You know, if you have cards like Sign in Blood available, that can be pretty nasty because again, just draw 2, lose 2, boom, and you take an additional 4. In formats where cards like Windfall or cards like Wheel of Fortune are available, that just cause everyone to draw a lot of cards all at once. This card is amazing because all of a sudden your life total is going to the freaking moon while you're draining all your opponents. Like those kinds of interactions. So like you're saying, EDH 100%, yes. Like she's great. But yeah, as far as like competitive, especially in standard right now, like I want to believe that this might have a place in like a mono black control situation because all of a sudden, like in Invoke Despair or you know, I'm trying to think of
It's
other,
really good
you
with
know,
Liliana.
yeah, yeah,
A
with
lot of
Lily,
cards are good
100%.
with Liliana, but
Yeah, surprise,
this card
surprise.
specifically, Liliana can shrink their hand, and then
hmm
anytime that they're drawing a card, now they're being punished, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
It's one other detail that is mildly unfortunate with Sheoldred that I want to point out. It specifically says draw a card. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but a lot of the ways that you can like some of the more effective like card draw spells and card draw effects that are in standard right now are not actually card draw. You know, memory deluge, for example. You look at cards and put them into your hand. Sorin, you look at the top card, you may put it into your hand. Like, if I'm not mistaken, those do not count as draws. And so as a result, they do not trigger Sheoldred. So that's something to be very aware of as you are selecting what cards to put around this in a deck.
mhm.
You know, Memory Deluge and Sheoldred don't really work together. I mean, they may be fine in the same deck depending on what you're trying to do, but you know, and so I can see some kind of mid-range shell trying to leverage this card if it has targeted draw effects that are 90% of the time going to target you, but every so often you're going to hit that, you know, you're going to hit your opponent with it. Also like actually I wouldn't be surprised in like a Grixis or even I could see a Rakdos build because of Obnixilus's ult.
Mm.
If you ult
It's
with
just an auto
Obnixilus,
win. Yeah, it's just
you
an
just
auto
win.
win. Yep.
Yeah, that's it. If you know, if Obnix of the adversary, you hit that -7, your opponent is just dead.
Yeah, they
Like,
take 21.
yeah, just boom, just you're completely blown
Blackjack,
out.
just right to the
Yeah,
face.
it's over. Yeah,
Yep.
and so like, you know, all right. So there is something here, but the amount of hoops you have to jump through to pull that off, and on top of that, it requires your 4-drop to stick and survive, and that's that's asking a lot in modern Magic.
For sure.
Yeah.
Our next card I think is actually one that's pretty spicy and I think could see play somewhere. Not sure where, but somewhere. So we have Defiler of Dreams, aka Defiler of Mana Cost. 3 colorless, 2 blue for a 4/3 flyer, Phyrexian Sphinx. Has an additional cost to cast blue permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost 1 blue less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of blue mana that you pay whenever you cast a blue permanent spell. Draw a card. So not only does this card draw you cards, it makes your cards cheaper. It has flying. The only downside to this card is it costs 5 mana and it's a 4/3.
Yes.
Other than that, I mean, it seems obviously bonkers where you can just, like, if you have some way of getting your life back or not caring about your life, you can cast whatever blue permanent spells for 0
hmm
mana, pretty much.
Pretty much. Yeah.
What do you think?
I think this card is interesting. When I first saw it, I didn't see that it only affected blue permanent spells. Like I thought it was all blue spells, and I was like, "This is the most insane thing ever! I can't believe they did this." And then,
Yeah, that
like,
would be
yeah, but thank
quite
goodness. Okay, it's only
absurd.
permanents. Whoo! You know, because yeah, if you could hit like Fading Hopes and Considers for 2 life
I'll
instead of
just
mana,
brainstorm. Couple of life here,
like it'd be
just
insane. That would be absolutely busted. So thank goodness this is not what this card does. I think the 3 toughness is also very intentional. So this does not pass the strangle test, which is a very important piece of removal right now. A lot of and Voltage Surge is another one that's out there getting a lot of love. And this does die to both. So I think there's a reason for that. But I don't know. Like I don't see like the first card that I think of with this is Omen of the Sea. Like I want Defiler of Dreams and Omen of the Sea in the same deck. I want to be able to basically cast Omen of the Sea for 1.
mm-hmm.
And you know, like that's neat. And then draw 2 cards instead of just the 1. Like cool, but at the same time, like, is it like is that really all that great? And I'm trying to think of good blue permanents
It's
that
not a
are
spirit. That's the problem with this card. It's not a spirit. If it was
yeah,
a spirit,
exactly.
I think it'd be really good because maybe you can chain off some spirits with like
Yep, I can
your
see that.
Realm Walker or whatever the green card is too. Maybe
Hmm.
cast a bunch of spirits off the top of your deck.
Yeah,
Other than
and it
that,
well,
like, yeah, I think the stats on it just aren't great. I think
no.
that's really what it is, right? Like,
Hmm. It's too fragile. It's too expensive. And because decks like that, like the other card that's out there right now that like you might want to almost pair it with is Delver. Although like even then, I'm just thinking of like trying to find good blue, like good cheap blue creatures we could be casting off this. And you're absolutely right. Being able to chain multiple spirits, drawing a bunch of cards, like cool idea. Like for sure, you could do neat things with that. Spectral Sailors and Mausoleum Wanderers coming in for 2 life instead of especially if you have like a Soul Warden style effect, so you're gaining some of that life back. Like, okay, like that could be a neat engine. You could do some cool things with that. But I think it's asking too much. You're absolutely right that it not being a spirit means it's not going to benefit from any of those tribal synergies that you might have in that deck. And yeah, and it costs too much. Like if this
yeah,
was
it
a
just
four
costs too
drop,
much.
if this was a 4 drop, totally different story. I think maybe we can find a way to make it work. But a 4/3 for 5 is just, and it's a setup piece. If you spend 5 mana, drop this, you don't
For
get
your
haste. There's
setup
no
piece,
ETB trigger.
yeah,
There's no ETB trigger. You pass the turn, your opponent strangles it.
feels bad, man.
Well, that's neat. Like you just got time walked. You spent
Oh,
5 mana and you got literally nothing for it. Now, granted, yes, dice removal is not a good argument, but we have to be aware of it. We have to be aware of how likely it is. How likely is a card to actually do the thing in whatever meta it's in? And I can't imagine this card actually working in modern Magic, which is unfortunate because it looks like it should be powerful. Yeah.
so yeah, I think I agree with all those points there. Our
Hmm.
next card here is an interesting one. We got the kicker mechanic, of course, making a return back once we're in Dominaria, as always. We have Archangel of Wrath. 2 colorless, 2 white. It's not the type of Wrath that you're thinking.
Oh
It's a
man.
3/4 with flying and lifelink. Kicker black and or kicker red. When this card enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, 2 damage to anything. If it was kicked twice, 2 damage to anything. So, essentially, if you kick it twice, it's 4 damage divided among 2 separate things, or 4 damage to one thing, whatever you really want to do. Essentially, like a 6 mana Flame Tongue Kavoo. That's a 3/4 flying lifelinker. That sounds great.
Yeah.
At the end of the
And
day, it sounds really good.
the other great thing about that, the creature is what's dealing the damage, and it has lifelink. So if you're dealing that damage, you are gaining life off it too. So these are little sacred fires that kind of like tiny lightning
Yeah, they could
helices that you're
actually
firing out.
end up like this card could swing the game quite a
Mm-hmm.
bit. The
Big
4
time.
toughness is huge. Especially we're going to get to another card here later that is going to be able to break through this card. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think this card's really good. I think we're going to see this card in a few different types of decks. It's not necessarily like a 4 of, but as like a 2 of, 3 of, maybe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, you could maybe see it somewhere, but 4 mana to 6 mana is quite a lot, so we'll see. But I think that this card's strong. I think that you will see this somewhere. I don't know what deck wants to play it because there's not really like any Mardu strategies right now. I mean, you could play it in just a white red deck. You could play it in
Yeah.
just a black and white deck. Um, but I mean, it's a strong card. It reads like a really strong card. Like I stated earlier, it kind of lives up to what modern Magic is as. Comes into play effects. It has 2
Mm-hmm.
relevant abilities. The stats on the card aren't bad for the mana. I mean, if it was a 4 mana 4/4, I think this card would probably be a little bit pushed for sure. Already, it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
strong, right?
Yeah. Well, and like I can see, um, I mean, this card is freaking awesome. I get, and yeah, exactly. Like you're saying, in Orzhov, you want it. In Boros, you want it. In mid-range strategies, it could work because it can deal, additional damage directly to your opponent and get rid of pesky, targets, things like Gala Greeters or Thalias that are, causing you all kinds of headaches on the board. You can just pick them off strategically with this. Being able to like shock on demand just by having a thing coming into play is really nice. Um, I think and the mana value is reasonable. That's the other thing that's really important. 3/4 flying lifelinker for 4 is fine. Like it's not amazing. So like in mono white, I'm not really feeling this if I don't have some way to leverage those kickers. But a 3/4 flying lifelinker for 5 that blast something for 2 and gains me 2 life when it ETBs. Yeah, it's kind of a little flame tongue combo. And if it's late in the game and I've got 6 available and I happen to have these colors, 4 damage, 4 life, plus a 3/4 flyer.
Yeah, plus the
You're
3/4
exactly right. That can make
flyer.
a
I mean,
big
that's
difference.
a 7-point life swing
Mm-hmm.
off of just one card for 6 mana. Like, this is like a
That's
crazy
pretty
siege
solid.
rhino, right? Like,
Oh, right? Exactly. This is like it's a Mardu Siege Rhino is what we're looking at here. I dig it. I think this card's great.
yeah, card's strong. I expect to see it somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's gonna find a home. Not sure exactly where yet, but it's gonna find a home.
Yeah, it'll find out. So our next card is actually one that man, when I read this card, it kind of like blew my mind for a second. And there's like 2 parts of it that really blow my mind. So the phasing of Zalfir, so 2 colorless, 2 blue. It's a saga. It ain't just your granddad's saga. You get to read ahead. So read ahead is choose a chapter and start with that many lore counters. Add 1 after your draw steps. Sorry. Add 1 after your draw step. Skip chapters don't trigger. Sacrifice after 3. Sorry, the wording on this is like kind of weird. So essentially, sagas, some of them now, you can start with whatever chapter you want.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to get the additional abilities, and it pretty much, it'll keep working like a regular saga, but you get to skip ahead. The crazy part is that the clause on this card specifically, you like almost want to skip ahead. So
pretty much, yeah.
The first 2
I'm gonna skip
chapters
the
of
3 on
this
this thing almost every time, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. The first 2 chapters of this, another target non-land permanent phases out. If you can't it can't phase in for as long as you control this card. So essentially you're keeping something, this is such a white card. So this card comes in and it banishing lights something, Oblivion Ring.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it stays out. So those are the first 2 chapters. And you get to do that twice. The last chapter of this, destroy all creatures. Hold on. This is a blue card, right?
Yes.
Two islands in the top right. Destroy all creatures. Yep. For each creature destroyed this way. For each creature destroyed this way. Not just opponent. For each creature destroyed this way. Its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature token. I just I don't know how strong I don't know how to judge this card. It's doing a lot. Like, it's 2 removal spells for a little bit. And then you're just like, yeah, I just blow everything up. Or you can also phase your card out. Mm-hmm. And then in 2 turns, you wipe everything. You might get your own Phyrexians. And then your opponent might get a few Phyrexians. And then maybe you play something that bounces all X or less. And then you bounce all the tokens or something. I don't know. This card seems kind of crazy, right? Like, I don't know how to judge it, honestly.
Following this up with the Meat Hook Massacre is pretty sweet. Or a Massacre Worm, or something like that, some kind of that style effect. Or actually, like in older formats, Elishnorn could be pretty savage with this.
The Hitsugos consumes.
Yes, yep, 100%, 100%. So I mean, there are ways to really take advantage of this and really lean into it. Ways that if you have a lot of ways to deal with tokens, then this all of a sudden turning all of your opponent's things into tokens is pretty great. I like the flexibility of it, because you're absolutely right. Even if you don't necessarily want that 3rd trigger, even if you're not trying to wipe the board, being able to just remove a pesky enchantment, like if your opponent is running away with a Hallowed Haunting, you can just get rid of it for a turn. And then actually with phasing going up against Hallowed Haunting, you can prevent the Hallowed Haunting from triggering, and then you can blow up all the spirits and turn them into Phyrexians. Assuming you get to survive that long, which is not always a given against that deck. But I don't know. It's weird. To be honest, this is one of those cards that I think is too cute. I don't believe we're gonna see this get any real play, because I feel like the 2 modes are actually at odds with each other. Because the first thing that I think of is, I get to phase my thing out and then wipe the board. My thing survives. Okay, that's neat. But the board wipe's not that devastating, because everybody's going to be getting Phyrexian Grizzly Bears.
You get the same amount of creatures. The same amount of creatures stay in play. They just turn into 2/2s. Essentially, it's like a weird polymorph without the trigger effect. But I guess it turns them into 2/2s, right? There's a card from Fate Reforged, Reality Shift,
Right.
It turns it
Yeah.
into a
Into a face
2/2,
down
like,
creature, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
face
but a
down
2/2.
creature.
Yep.
Yeah, and that card's like you straight up exile the card, but they get a 2/2 off the top of their deck. They manifest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and phasing kind of reminds me of that. Where like, yeah, it could be really good in a pinch, but you're still keeping parity with what's happening on the board. So like,
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to your opponent's turn, and they can attack you with the army
Yeah.
that they still have. So I don't know.
Exactly. No, when you think of like, okay, I need a board wipe right now. It's when your opponent has like a big pile of 1/1s or big pile of 2/2 tokens. Like this isn't gonna help you in that situation. Like it's just not. If your opponent has 200 Scoot Swarms on the board, Phasing of Zalfir is going to turn all those little 1/1 Scoots into 2/2 Phyrexian creatures. It actually makes the problem worse, you know? So it's one of those things where unless you're leveraging ETB triggers, unless you have some way to like manipulate the tokens, I don't know. This I think is going to be there are going to be janky combos with this that I think are going to be fun and interesting, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I don't think this is going to see any kind of main deck play, which is unfortunate because when Morrow put out, like when Mark Rosewater put out his spoilers, he actually did spoil this card a little bit. He put a little teaser out there saying that Dominaria United will include a mono blue card that says destroy all creatures on it. And obviously referring to this one, and a lot of people were just like, "Holy cow!" So like blue tempo mages, the Zori's control mages are going to have new board wipes, and maybe I could play mono blue control now. But now seeing it, I don't think this is going to work. Because
Agreed.
even with the like O-ring style effect that you get on chapter 1 and 2, it comes back after chapter 3. And if you want to just exile a pesky permanent from your opponent, you've spent 4 mana to do it in a format when borrowed time is still legal. And
March of the Otherworldly Light.
March of Otherworldly Light, exactly. And then chapter 3, you don't have a choice. If you put this in chapter 1, it's going to get those lore counters. Chapter 3 is going to trigger whether you like it or not. And so if you have a couple of really good creatures on the board, I'm sorry, they're gone now. You have a couple 2/2s. Enjoy. It's yeah. I don't.
Yeah,
I
it's just
think
okay. I think at the
yeah.
end of the day, it's just
I'm
okay.
not seeing it with this one. I
Yeah.
like the design. I like the idea, but I don't think it's gonna see play.
Yeah, read ahead is going to be strong.
Yeah, Read Ahead has very cool implications for sure.
So our next card here is actually, if you told me that in 2022 Magic we would fix banding, I would literally be like, you are so full of shit that
Right?
I don't even know what to tell you because they'll never do that. But anyways, Guardian of New Benalia, colorless white 2/2 human soldier, enlist, aka modern banding. As this
Modern
creature
banding,
attacks,
100%.
you may tap a non-attacking creature you control without summoning sickness. When you do, add its power to these creatures until end of turn. When this card enlists a creature, you scry 2, discard a card. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. So it has like the old school Season Hallow Blade and the Spirit
Mm-hmm.
that's in standard right now. Um, you may tap a non-attacking creature control without summoning sickness. I just, oh man. And it's not attacking this. It's just banding's not good, Ham. I don't know like how much more like we could say this, but banding just isn't. Banding's not good. It's
Yeah.
just not. There's not a world where banding is. Even in 2022 Magic, like this card's trying really hard. Like it's rare. It's got really
Mm-hmm.
cool artwork. It has a cool name. It has like 3 abilities. It's just like a freaking. It's just another like Charmin Prince, right? That's
Right.
all that it really ends up being. But I'm sorry, I just
Yeah.
don't think this card's good. You have to. It's a vehicle. It's a really bad vehicle. Imagine if vehicles
Kinda.
were like, oh, you have to only use creatures that have been out a full turn. Then you'd be like, vehicles suck. I know no one would
Yeah.
play
Exactly.
vehicles. Like Smuggler's
Yes.
Copter might have had a hard time getting played if it took like a card that had been out for a while for it to actually matter, because then you just have a card that didn't do shit half the time. But like
Right.
this is kind of like what this reminds me of. Like, when am I gonna want to be tapping? This is just like really bad Exalted. It's like 3
Kinda.
really bad abilities on one. They somehow managed to do that. They somehow managed to create a ball of text, a useless ability, and then 2 other useful abilities on one card. This is like the most just bipolar card I think I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know what to make of it, honestly. It's just such a
Yeah.
weird card, right? Like,
Yeah, I think enlist is going to be a mechanic that is going to be okay in limited and completely unplayable in constructed, and Guardian of New Benalia is probably as good as it gets. Because we have a
At least the
2/2
scries.
creature for 2. That scry 2 is very real. Being able to scry 2
Yeah.
theoretically every turn, I mean, potentially. Okay, there's something to that. And I like the general idea of being able to take out a creature that you do not want to be attacking with and add its power to the attack without putting it in harm's way. All right, like that's interesting, but that's only going to be valuable. Like, actually, I could see. Okay, now I'm starting to see some lines.
Yeah, like I
Um,
could be wrong. Like now that, I know as soon as you start like mentioning some powerful effects, I'm like, okay, well maybe this card is strong. Like maybe there's cards that whenever they tap they do something. So you can
right,
get that
exactly.
full
Yeah,
effect off of this without it having to attack.
and we also have cards like Shakedown Heavy. Is another thought that comes to mind right away, where it's a 6/4 with a downside when it attacks. Well, if it enlists, it just adds +6/+0 to whatever it enlists on. So all of a sudden, Guardian of Benalia is hitting for as an 8/2. As early as turn 4, which is not amazing, but still, you're hitting with 8 power that your opponent can't, and you're scrying 2 in that case. Like, there's something to it. Honestly, to be completely frank, the first card that I thought of with that was Yargle, because Yargle is a 9/4.
I'm just
Right? Like, I want to enlist Yargle. I want to get 9 power onto whatever's attacking and
You're
not
killing
put my
me.
Yargle in harm's way.
You're killing me
Like,
right now with this
that's
Yargle
what I want to do with it.
nonsense. Damn it, HamHocks. Damn it. What are you
I know,
doing?
but
Yargle.
here's the but
What
at
is
the end of the day, I
this?
do think Enlist is somewhat flawed. Um, and I think you're dead on actually. Like I hate saying cards or full mechanics are unplayable. I'm hesitant to do that, but I do think Enlist is fundamentally flawed because you have to enlist the creature upon attacks. Your opponent gets the opportunity to react to however you enlist. So if Guardian of New Benalia attacks, you enlist another creature. The fact that you can't enlist a creature that has summoning sickness really sucks. Like, you're exactly right. With vehicles, that was one of the big benefits. If I have a vehicle that crews 2, I can drop a creature with power 2, tap it right away, vehicle's live. So all of a sudden, like, in vehicle decks, you like vehicle decks are one of the only aggro decks that consistently run board wipes. Because I can wipe the entire board, my vehicles are fine, and now I can just jam a creature and they're attacking again right away.
Mm-hmm.
With Enlist, you don't get that. Like, I should be able to play Guardian of New Benalia on 2, Shakedown Heavy on 3, and start swinging for 8. Like, that would be dope. And I would build decks around that, but it doesn't work that way. But the other thing that would make it excellent is if you can enlist during combat after blockers are declared. So if you attack with 2 or 3
Yeah,
enlist
that's what kind of
creatures,
bothers me is
then being able to
uh,
tap another creature as a combat trick, then you're playing a little shell game with your opponent that is really cool. Like, that could be neat,
man,
but it just doesn't work that
it's like
way.
they almost got banding right. But it's
Almost.
banding.
It's still banding. Yep.
Like that's really how I feel about it. It's like they were really close to being like, oh, I just feel like they just overthought it with this ability. Like they were so close to just being like, maybe subtract this, and okay, now it's good. Like you said, like all these extra things, like it shouldn't have to have it shouldn't have to be like non-hate, be able to attack with it, and then you have to do it during
If I
attacks,
could,
which make it worse. So then, you're just like gonna get, you're just gonna time walk yourself. Where you're like, yeah, tap my 5/5 and it's dead. My
yeah,
2/2
and
gets pushed. That was gonna be a 7/7. It's just dead, and I don't get to scry because the enlist didn't happen.
well, and on top of that,
Um,
the creature that
you
you're
can make it
adding
indestructible, but
yeah, in this case, sure. The other thing is the creature cannot be attacking. So if your creature has vigilance, you can't
yeah, that's what
attack
I
with
don't
and
like
then
about it.
enlist,
Yeah, I don't
which
like
kind
that.
of sucks. Because
Yeah.
again, that would be really cool. It doesn't really make flavorful sense, but it would at least be powerful, Because then you could double up on that attack. But at the end of the day, like if I have 2, for example, just throw another, if I have Guardian of New Benalia and another 2/2, why wouldn't like? I understand there may be some blocking scenarios, but at the end of the day, why wouldn't I just attack with both of them?
Yeah, this
Like
card.
90% of the time, if I could attack with the other creature, I'll just attack
It's
with
just
it.
like a
Like,
limited bomb, man. That's all this card
yeah,
really
I think
is to
so.
me. It's just a
I think
limited
you're right.
bomb.
Yeah.
But our next card is actually one that had a lot of people, kind of freaking out a little bit. So, what's really funny about this next card is they spoiled it like right at the end of the stream, and they only showed it for literally like 2 seconds. It was like on the screen. they barely zoomed in, and then that was it. And you were like, "Oh, what?" So like you, of course, you had to go back on the internet and freak out about it. I mean, I screenshot it as quick as I could, but everyone's kind of freaking out because of the completed Ajani. So Ajani has joined,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, the dark side. It hurts. Now Ajani is still positive colors, but oh, Johnny, they've definitely seen better days, and they've definitely had
Mm-hmm.
better planeswalkers. But so we have a Johnny sleeper agent, so colorless, green, hybrid, Phyrexian mana, green white. What a mouthful! And then white
Right.
mana, so 4 mana or 3 if you want to pay the 2 life for the Phyrexian mana. And then of course it's completed, so if you do pay the life for it, then it's going to come in with 2 less loyalty. So essentially, if you pay the 4 mana, it comes in with 4. If you complete it, it comes in with 2. +1, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker, put it in your hand otherwise. You may put it on the bottom, so you can kind of give yourself a little bit of some mini scrying there. -3, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among creatures, among up to 3 target creatures. They gain vigilance until end of turn. -6, man, I love the last 3 words of this. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a creature or planeswalker spell, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. So, Ham,
There they are.
hear me out. I ain't worried about the first 2 parts of this card. That's
Right.
not really what I'm excited about. What I'm excited about is if I get to ultimate this card and then poison my opponent to death. I think that would
Oh yeah.
be. It's what I really like about this is not like like this is a card that doesn't really seem that crazy, but it's a hell of a sideboard card.
Mm-hmm.
Because what ends up happening with this is that, let's say your opponent hasn't board wiped yet and they tapped out, maybe killed one of your cards, and you still got like 2 creatures. So if you play this, you're automatically going to uptick, or you can distribute the counters, or
Mm-hmm.
you can start redrawing and getting some card advantage. If you get
Right.
to that -6, well, you're going to get an emblem. Everyone knows emblems you can't even interact with. Against control, you don't even care if your cards get countered anymore. You're
Mm-hmm.
just like, cast this, you get 2 poison. Cast this, you get 2 poison. All right, how many more creatures? All you need to do is cast 5 creatures when you ultimate this, and the game
Mm-hmm.
ends for any of your opponents. Like, I think this
Oh
card
yeah.
is it's interesting because the first half of it doesn't seem that crazy, but the ultimate on this is actually like you can get to it, and it's a
Right.
very game-ending and like kind of tilting experience,
Oh,
right?
big time. Yeah, big time. I think it is somewhat unfortunate that this is entering standard right as Finn the Fangbearer is rotating out,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they would actually get along really nicely, because you could do like a green white death touch creature heavy deck, and a Johnny Sleeper Agent would be a lovely like top end way, especially like you're saying, it likes to sideboard in against control. Um, top end way if you're not able to connect in combat, or at least very often, because I don't know about you, but I've played a couple of Finn the Fangbearer decks, and usually what ends up happening is you connect with a couple of early hits, get them to like 6 poison counters, and then they wipe your board and you just can't rebuild and it's over. But if you have a Najani all of a sudden, and you can get to that ultimate, then like you're saying, you just need to cast stuff. Like I cannot tell you how badly I want to kill somebody by getting them to 10 poison counters by playing an Ornithopter. I don't know why that was the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this card, but it was like, I need to do that. I need to kill somebody by casting an Ornithopter. And like you're saying, it doesn't even need to resolve. Like it's just casting it
Yeah,
puts the poison counters on. Like
it's really
I
strong
think
against control.
yeah, it's
Like
really
all
strong.
those abilities are strong
Yeah,
against control.
totally. Well, and the funny thing too is these abilities, the +1 and the -3, those could have just been on an Ajani. Like I could see that +1 on just any Ajani. Like, it didn't, even if he wasn't completed, you know? Just look at the top card. If it's a creature or planeswalker, draw it. If it's not, you can tuck it away. Like, all right, that just seems like a decent ability. And then -3, put 3. I mean, putting counters on stuff and giving them vigilance. Like, haven't we seen a Johnny do stuff like that already? So, like, it fits flavorfully with the character. So, like, yes, he has been, completed. He's been Phyrexianized, but he's still a Johnny. He still has his abilities, his powers. He's still bringing his unique skills to the table, just not for the team we want to see him on. Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
I like
that's
that. I think
actually
it's cool.
pretty funny. Not for the team that
Yeah,
that we want him to
he's
be
not on our
on.
team anymore. Yeah,
Yeah, he's not
that's
on the good side, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
I don't want to discount any planeswalkers.
Hmm.
Sometimes you end up getting burned for doing that. This is a 3 mana planeswalker, etc., etc. 3 mana planeswalkers get played. It has a
Well,
+1. It draws a
and
card. I don't know. I mean,
I could very easily see a Selesnya go wide deck that has an alternative. Obviously the beatdown is the first plan with those kind of decks, but I can totally see stick a Johnny on 4, uptick him to 5 loyalty, and just guard him. Like and then next turn uptick again. The turn after, insta emblem. Don't even hesitate. Just make it happen, and then your whole
how
hand
about
it just becomes burn spells effectively. Like it's insane.
Abzan
Yeah,
+1/+1 counter deck with whining constrictors?
let's
Where
go.
that
I'm in.
-3 is really good. You
Yep.
play Verter's Gearhulks. You play come on,
Vornclex
print
can be in
Walking
there.
Ballista, so I can
Hardened
just
scales. Like, yeah, let's
do
go.
some
Like, I'm
crazy
in.
stuff. Yeah, Hardened
Hmm.
Scales, like yeah, I mean, and it's only a 3 mana walker. Like I said, it doesn't have to
Yeah,
come in with the 4 loyalty. It doesn't have to
true.
do everything crazy right away. I think there's potential for the card, but I could also see it literally just never getting played
Yeah.
because it doesn't. It's missing two things pretty much, which is all like the it doesn't have two pluses or like a 0,
Hmm.
and it doesn't protect itself.
Very true.
The
That
number
is a
one
big
problem with
downside.
this card is
Yep.
that it doesn't make a token. If it somehow made like a 1/1 Phyrexian cat, which would be pretty badass, by the way.
Totally.
If that was like a -2 even, or like a 0, I think that this card would be really, really, really strong. But I think where it's at right now, because it doesn't protect itself, and the fact that like if you play it on 3, it's like yeah, it pretty much comes in with 2 loyalty. You uptick to
Hmm.
get to 3, so I guess that's fine, but what if you whiff on your draw and then it's
Hmm.
just like it's kind of like just like an awkward card,
Yeah.
but it has powerful effects. So
Yeah.
I don't
That's
know.
interesting.
We could see it. I like
Hmm.
it. The artworks for the card are pretty cool as well.
Absolutely.
So our next card is a common that we're just gonna touch on for a bit. Impede Momentum, colorless blue sorcery. Tap target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. That's right. New kinds of counters, Ham. If a permanent with a
Hmm.
stun counter will become untapped, remove one of those counters from it instead, and then you get to scry one. So, yeah, in limited, I think that this card's decent.
Hmm.
Constructed, maybe not as much, but stun counters. Let's go. What if there's a powerful card that continually can keep stunning cards?
Yeah. This feels very like I look at stun counters and I feel very similar to the way I did when keyword counters got introduced in Ikoria, because
Mm-hmm.
like I couldn't tell you that I wanted them, but the moment they showed up, it's like, oh, it's about damn time. Like it just makes sense. It fits because we've had this effect a ton. Blue locking a creature down for 1 turn has been a thing forever, right? Like tap it, it doesn't untap. We've all seen that little like blue chain appear around a card in Arena. Like we know that, the idea of like, oh, everything untaps except this. And so now putting a counter on it and you can lock it down for multiple turns. That's pretty cool. Like
Mm-hmm.
this particular one is kind of meh. It makes it's okay blue like
It's good
removal
and
kind of.
limited. I
Yeah,
think it's
exactly. In
really
limited,
good and
it's really
limited.
solid.
Yeah.
Because if you have a board state that is capable of applying pressure to your opponent, getting one potential blocker or one attacker that's coming back at you effectively off the board for
For
three
three
turns,
turns.
that's big. That's a big time. If you're in a control deck that's trying to just bide as much time as possible, that's basically just nothing. Uh, but it buys you a little bit of time early, I guess. But in constructed, I wouldn't want it in that kind of shell. Um, but I mean, 3 turns.
Yeah.
That's 3 turns is a long time. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a cool card. Stun
yeah, I dig
counters.
it.
Welcome to Magic.
Yep.
Um, our next card is actually like a really interesting card because I got excited because I saw it and I was like, "Ooh, red card," and it looks aggressive. But when I read it, I was like, "Oh no, this is not as aggressive as I want it to be." So Raja's Firebrand, colorless red, 3/1 human warrior. Whenever it attacks, target creature defending player controls with power less than this card can't block this turn. And then it has Domain, 5 colorless and a red. This card gets +2/+2 in a turn, and it costs 1 less for each basic land type among lands that you control. Activate only once each turn. I just, I don't know if this cuts it.
Yeah.
Honestly, It doesn't have a comes into play effect. That's really how I feel about most Magic these days. And for mono red deck wins, yeah, I could see maybe the first few days people trying this card out and seeing if it's good. And yeah, okay, Ham. We'll probably end up playing it in the red deck, but I'm not going to be too happy about it.
Yeah,
I like
I
that
think
this
that's
card can
yeah.
block.
Yeah, being
Sometimes
able to
these
trade
types of
up.
cards can't block,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Yeah,
think
being
it's
able to
just
trade
okay,
up with
right?
3 toughest creatures is pretty decent. Yeah, I'm intrigued by the idea. I think that attack trigger is actually pretty cool. You know, target to pin down or to minimize one of your opponent's blockers is kind of cool. Like I kind of want to put this in a deck with cards like Kargan Intimidator that can also, you know, like mitigate blockers. Um, you know, it's an interesting idea. The domain trigger on this, I think, is a great. So domain, you know, is a new mechanic that's coming back. This is a great illustration of why domain tends to be underwhelming. You
It
know,
just costs too much mana to activate.
it costs way too much mana to activate, and it, you know, in order for this to be okay, like the best case scenario with this is you pay 1 red and the firebrand gets +2/+2 until end of turn.
That's me.
It's okay. And if you can activate it multiple times, it'd be great. But since you can only activate it once per turn, meh. And
Yep.
exactly, that's the best case scenario, and that can only happen if you have all 5 land types in your mana base. Which,
That's
like,
just
every
I.
other element of this card says it wants to be in like a mono red or maybe like a 2-color, like a Boros aggro deck. Like
You need
that's what this
triomes
looks
for
like to
this deck
me,
to be good, and triomes are like too
and there's
slow.
domain. Yeah, exactly. Like exactly. Like triomes really help the domain pop off. However, they minimize the ability to get aggressive threats down. So it's like, yeah, I think it's going to be hard to really make this card work. I think the domain ability is an onboard gotcha that some people are gonna get bit by in combat. Because you know, in late games, especially in limited, when your opponent has like 5 or 4 mana available to pay into it for that +2/+2 just at that moment when you need it, and the blocker is going to forget about it. Like that's going to happen a couple of times. It's going to feel really really bad, but for the most part, I don't see it. I
It's
think
power less
is it
than too. It's not even power equal to or less than. It's only power less than, so it has to be a
right?
smaller card. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's okay.
It, yeah, it's okay. Like
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know.
we'll
I
see.
like the design. I like the idea, but I just
Yeah, I
eh.
like it as like a potential red aggressive card, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, I don't think I really want this card. I don't know.
Yeah, when I see 3/1 for 2, I'm listening. You know, because like 3 power for 2 mana. Okay, let's talk.
Yeah, the
But
stats are good, and the
yeah,
ability could be relevant. Like, yeah, stopping some chump
yeah.
blockers, tokens, but
You know,
I don't know.
I like one card that I've been trying to brew a little bit around in standard right now is Ishin. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden Rada being able to if you're already playing like an aggressive situation, if you have an Ishin on board, Rada's Firebrand's the Firebrand's ability would trigger twice, and so it could
Mm.
potentially get 2 chump blockers off the field. Like, and in the early game, that's very relevant.
Oh yeah.
So like, there's synergy to be had here. It's just, yeah, I don't know how good that deck is going to be in the end. You know?
Yeah. Now this next card, I actually think this next card is kind of absurd. I really do. I read it. This is one of the few ones that I read at first really quickly, and I was like, yeah, this card's kind of messed up. So the World Spell, 5 colorless, 2 green. It has read ahead. It's a saga, of course. So the first 2 chapters, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-saga permanent card from among them. Put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And then the third chapter, put up to 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Ham, I just want to put like 2 Titan Industries into play with this card.
100%.
Or what I really want to do is like the first thing that came to my head when I read it, I was like, wow, Xander and Titan. And then you're just like, oh, or
Mm-hmm.
what if you play a copy spell with the Titan? So you get to play your
Ooh.
one of your whatever your clones, and you still get like all those effects. So like, I just think that this card for 7 mana feels pretty good. I think you could ramp into it and potentially
Mm-hmm.
just have some big bomby cards in your hand and just drop both of them into play. You're like, oh yeah, I'll just play Toxtrol and a Titan, and it just has like a fight rigging. It's just
Yeah,
like a really big fight rigging.
kind of. And on top of that, you can tuck this under a fight rigging.
Ooh,
I mean, so
let's
you could
go.
fight rigging this out, and if you have the big threats in your hand, just read ahead, drop them, and go to town. And if
Oh.
you don't, it gets them for you. Like,
Yeah, you can just go
yeah,
through the first two chapters and get
you
them,
go
and then
through the
once you get
chapter
to the
and you get
last
them.
chapter, you just go nuts.
Your opponent gets to see it coming. But much like there are other sagas like this in the past, like Song of Freyalise is one that has like an overrun effect as the third
Mm-hmm.
chapter. Like your opponent gets to see it coming, but it's one of those things. I kind of love that. I love slapping something down on the table and it's like, okay, it's not doing too much right now, but in 2 turns, this is gonna rough you up if you don't have an answer.
I mean, we
You
could we
know,
could just read ahead. We can just rip half the book in half, or
we
yeah, rip the
could
book in half,
totally,
and then just go ahead and just start slamming some cards on the battlefield, like a
but yeah.
couple of planeswalkers.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just feel like this card is kind of
Yeah.
nuts to me.
Well,
I
we're
don't
in a
know.
situation right now where we have, like you've mentioned, a couple of really powerful standard legal rotation proof cards. We have Toxtrol, we have Xander, we have Titan of frickin' Industry. That card is just insane.
Out of
We have
control.
Kami War. We have frickin' there's so many. Well, actually, this can't play
We
Kami War.
can't
Never mind,
Kami.
because yeah,
Yeah,
Saga.
fortunately,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can't
yeah.
Kami.
That's okay.
But
But anyway, that's fine. Um, and we have cards like fight rigging. This now is in the mix. We have so many ways, and we have great ramp spells. Like we were talking about Windgrave Spirit earlier. We have Topiary Stomper, which all of a sudden looks like maybe it'll work with these kind of things.
it's actually really
Like,
good with the world spell. Like the faster that you get to
mhm,
your cards, like the sooner you're gonna be able to just get some free dumb stuff.
get stuff exactly. Just
Yeah.
get big dumb stuff, and like there is big dumb stuff to be had, and we now have a lot of ways to get up to the big dumb stuff. We also have, what is it, the Llanowar Lone Speaker is in this set as a great
Mm-hmm.
2-drop mana dork. Like there are so many cool ways to ramp and so many great things to be ramping into that I don't see, if we were in any kind of green ramp situation, I don't see why not to have at least 2 of these in the deck.
Yeah, I'm playing like two or three of these right away in
Yeah,
the deck. I think that I want to be playing it in.
yeah.
It reminds me of the card, the dual face card from Turn Timber Symbiosis from
Yes, I was
Zendikar
thinking that
Rising.
too. Another great
Um,
7-drop that can take
yeah,
7 to play. Yep.
it feels like a tooth and nail. It feels like a Turn Timber Symbiosis. It's kind of like in between all these cards. I really expect this card to get played. Honestly, I like
Hmm.
the first time I read it, I thought it was kind of bonkers, and I still actually think it's even more insane. Like I know fight rigging isn't necessarily like a deck that we've been seeing a ton of, but this pushes it even more, and it's already like it by itself. Like if you ramp into it, and you happen to have two of your big bombs, like which does occur quite a lot sometimes, like
Hmm.
I just think this card's strong. I mean, let's just play like the Praetor, the blue Praetor into play. Um, this card, yeah, this card could just do some really dirty things, honestly.
Right.
I
Well, and the fact that the chapters 1 and 2, so even if you have an empty hand, like if let's say it's late in the game, you're in top deck mode, you hit this, you don't read ahead, you hit chapter 1, it immediately draws you a card. And
it's
you're
the
looking
card
at
you want in ramp
7
decks.
cards. So the selection is primo. Yeah.
It's the exact card you want in ramp decks. It's the card you ramp
Hmm.
into and it gives you card advantage, and then it gets to play your big dumb card for free.
Yeah.
If it resolves, it gets around counters with the last ability, so your card's going to come into play.
Yep. Well, and
Um,
if you're in that top deck mode, you don't have to do chapter 1. You can skip ahead to chapter 2.
yep,
And so the turn you drop it, you draw 1 card off the top. If you have the mana, you could even, I mean, well, you probably won't have the mana because you played World Spell, but you go to your next turn, it then triggers the chapter. You draw a card, then chapter 3 hits. You can just drop your 2 cards,
yep.
and boom, whatever they are, and you got to pick one of them. The other one was just a rip off the top, assuming it's a non-saga permanent. Um, which it may be a land or whatever, and you could just play it out with this.
Obviously,
So
the
like,
first thing that came to my head earlier, I was like, yeah, Fable plus anything, but it's like, oh, we can't just. Obviously, can't combo with Fable.
right,
I
but even
wish,
then,
but
yeah, I know, right? Like I want to be hitting like 2 Kami Wars off this because that would just be backbreaking. But obviously, yeah, it has a safeguard in place. It doesn't let you do that. But even if you hit 2 Titan of Industries, for example, like we're talking about these
oh
moments where you're getting
god,
like
just game's
14
over.
mana worth of stuff all hitting at once. And
Yeah,
yeah, that's amazing. Friggin' of course. But even if you're getting advantage of that chapter 3 after going through 1 and 2, and you're hitting
a
a
Wandering Emperor.
2-drop and a 3-drop, or you're hitting like a planeswalker, or I mean, even if you're only getting like only getting 5 or 6 mana worth of value off that, you're still getting 5 or 6 mana worth of value for free after selecting 2 cards out of your top 14 to put into your hand. I mean, like even like the floor on this card is still pretty high.
I think this
Is it
card's
you
nuts,
know?
man. I really
Yeah,
do.
I
I,
think
I
it's
really
solid.
think we're gonna see it. Just
Hmm.
another big dumb green mythic, and it draws you cards. It puts stuff into play. I'm sold on this card as someone that really enjoys playing big dumb green stuff. I think
Hmm.
this is definitely where I want to be.
Totally.
So our next card's pretty cool because it's kind of like a flashback to yet another legendary creature that we haven't seen in a while. So we have Braids, Arisen Nightmare, colorless 2 black 3/3 Nightmare legendary creature. At the beginner end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may also sacrifice a permanent that shares the card type with that. If they, for each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 and you draw a card. It's an EDH card. It's just a lot of text, and it doesn't have menace. Even it doesn't have lifelink. It doesn't draw a card when it comes into play. Like, I'm sorry, you're gonna hear me say that a lot during spoiler season nowadays, but yeah, it's just too slow, and it's a May. It just Ham.
I
What?
like the design on this card, but what I like about it is being able to fill your deck with cards that are various types. Also, this actually I think would work really well in again that Jund Windgrace deck because you can sacrifice your lands to this if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you can sacrifice your lands to this, and if your opponents don't sacrifice lands, they shock themselves and you draw cards. So in a deck with Windgrace's Spirit that's pulling lands out of your graveyard each turn, in addition to whatever land you're playing, that could be incredibly powerful because you're just going to be drawing a crazy number of cards because your opponents are not going to want to sacrifice their lands, especially in the early game. So that's kind of neat. So that is one way that you can abuse this card that I think is kind of cool. I do like the flavor here because I mean, originally Braid's Cabal minion, the first version of
It's a
Braids that we've
mess up
seen
card, man.
is busted, man.
It's a
You don't get
mess up
banned in
card.
Commander for being a fun card to play with. That's for sure. That one just says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices an artifact, creature, or land.
Card is
I don't think any.
busted.
I don't think anybody has sat down to a game of any format ever and thought, "Oh, good, Braves is on the table." Ever, like it's just like,
Oh, great! Now I
it's
have to sacrifice my
nasty.
lands.
Right, exactly. I got to start
Oh, they
sacrificing my
dark
lands. This
ritualed into it.
sucks.
Oh, this is
Yeah,
gonna be a great time. Oh,
yeah, awesome. We're gonna.
oh, great! On the play, they just turn to it, and you're just sitting there, and each player has to just lose the game. You
Yeah,
pretty
it's
much
just
just
like,
lose the
well,
game on the
yeah,
spot. Like,
we're all just gonna stand around and look at each other and not play anything. Yeah, this is awesome.
oh.
Yeah, but I think this one, you have some flexibility. You control what you sacrifice. So if your opponent has like one really bomb artifact or one really great creature, you can sacrifice a blood token that you don't care about or treasure token you have lying around because we all have treasure tokens lying around now. Um, and all of a sudden, it puts your opponent in the situation of like, okay, do you want to sacrifice this artifact that you're sitting on, or do you want me to draw a card? And you lose some life in the process. So it feels very similar to, the Ob Nixilis' uptick, where it's like it puts your opponent, it gives your opponent a choice, and they don't want either of them. Which I think is cool. Now, it doesn't work super well if your opponent's going wide, obviously, or if they have a lot of any particular thing. Because if they can just sacrifice a blood token in response, well, then what the hell was the point, right? You didn't
Yeah.
really, then nothing really has happened. However, I think the fact that you can sacrifice lands to this is really where it's going to come in clutch. I think that's going to be really
Yeah,
powerful.
I
But
just think it's a commander card. I don't really think
yeah,
it's too much like a tournament heavy card.
okay,
At
fair
the end of
enough.
the day, it's just the stats are okay, but when I read this card, I just look at it and it's just like a ton of text, just so your
Hmm.
opponent loses 2 life and you draw a card. Like,
Yeah.
I don't.
Uh,
And then you have to
Also,
actually
yeah.
sacrifice something. It's just, it's
Yeah,
just too
it's
much,
not, you don't get
Ham.
that
It's
trigger for
just too
free. You do have
much.
to sack something. Yep.
Yeah,
But
EDH it makes sense, but not in like 60 card constructed.
fair enough. And yeah, you might be right on that. I might not.
It's
Yeah.
a cool card, and I'm glad Braids is back. But I really think that that's probably about like where the card's at for
Hmm.
competitive play. Our next card is actually one that I think is somewhat decent. We have Herd Migration, 6 colorless and a green. It's a sorcery, has domain. Create a 3/3 green beast creature for each basic land type among land types you control. Colorless and a green, you discard this card, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle, and you gain 3 life. So this card could potentially fix your mana in a specific deck, or later it can get you a couple 3/3s if you're at least a 2-color deck. If you're like a 3-color deck or more, and you have one of each basic, then you're getting 9 power for 7 mana, but that's obviously way later in the game. One herd migration feeds into other ones where you're getting your lands to be able to play them, but if this card gets played, I just see it maybe as like a complete 4 of, or potentially like a 2 of, that gives you some kind of reach later in the game with like an added ability against like slower decks. Essentially, this is like environmental sciences that could get you mascot exhibition. So it's just
100%.
It's both of the cards at once,
Yeah.
but you get to choose what side you want.
That's kind of perfect.
Where we're
I like
at.
it.
Yeah.
I think if a 4-color or 5-color deck is viable, then this card is going to be a slam dunk. The fact that it's also 6 and 1 green makes it very easy to cast if you have 7 mana lying around. So that's great. Like, it's not like 3 green pips or anything. So that's nice. But that channel ability, that environmental sciences channel ability is, I mean, it's not called channel on the card, but come on.
Yeah, let's be honest. I thought the same thing too, Ham. I was like, oh, look, now everything has channel.
Pretty much. But at the same time, we've seen cards like this before. You know, like there was, there was a whole cycle actually back in, I believe, Legion. I think it was part of the Onslaught block that had basic land cycling, where you could actually pay 2 of any color, cycle a card. You know, a card that had island cycling, for example. You could discard it and go fetch an island and put it into your hand. And there were some that just had basic land cycling. You could grab any basic
I think
land.
we will, though. I think we will see a cycle. I could see a red one that's like 2 red and a colorless. It deals 3 damage. It's an instant. But then you can discard it for a red, and it deals 1 damage. Yeah, it deals 1 damage to a creature and 1 damage to an opponent or something. Like, I really feel like that we're going to see more of this in the set. Specifically, maybe even on, like, domain-type cards, right? Like, you know, each color is probably going to have its domain rare. You could argue that the red Rajas is the red one.
Maybe. Yeah, that might be how this plays out. Yeah, I would be surprised if we don't. I mean, obviously, domain needs to be in all 5 colors. Like, if there need to be domain payoffs in all 5 colors, because obviously, if you're playing a domain deck, that's kind of the point. Yeah, like the point is to have all 5 colors. So hopefully that's the case. And I think as far as green ones go, I think you're exactly right. This gets you. And yeah, actually, I love the way you phrased that. It's environmental sciences early. It's mascot exhibition late. It's
everything you want, and it's in your deck already. Like, I think it's good. Boom. I think I wanted to talk about it because it's a card that whenever I read cards like that, I'm like, yeah, that card's either going to get played a decent amount or it's just not. And in its life and standard, we'll see. Yeah, the flexibility's there.
Yeah, I think about 70% of the time it's going to get channeled. I think the majority of the time people are going to be chucking it.
3 life's a lot, Ham. That's more than environmental sciences. Like, that's really good against. That's a lightning bolt against a red deck. Against any aggro deck, that's 3 life. Like, it's pretty good.
Oh yeah. No, that 3 life is very significant because, well, environmental sciences, I can't tell you how many times I've pulled environmental sciences in the late game just to gain that 2 life, even when I don't need mana. Like, we've all done it, right, against aggressive decks. So to have it in your, this is main deckable, obviously. You don't have to take it out of your sideboard with another effect. So you can just hit it on 2 and just gain 3. That's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And to make sure you hit your land drop on 3, like, yeah, I dig it.
Pretty strong card.
Pretty solid, yeah.
Our next one here is a legendary creature, Namada, Primeval Ward. On the screen, you might see it in non-English because I think that's like one of the versions that's available right now. But it's
no, I see the translation though. Yeah.
Yep. 2 colorless, black green for a 3/4 legendary creature. I'm not sure. It's like a tree folk, I think is what it is. Its reach. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When you do, create a 1/1 green sapling token. 1 green, sack a sapling. This card gets +2/+2 until on a turn. Black and a colorless, sack 2 saplings, draw a card. Essentially, this is Kalidas at home.
Totally.
So we have Kalidas at home. Yeah. It can get bigger just until on a turn, or it could draw you some cards. I honestly don't really... it's a good card. You don't play more than 2. And if anything, it's more of a sideboard card. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I can see that. And the fact that it's legendary is also relevant.
Yeah,
like,
it's a big
this
downside.
is definitely... against like a deck that wants to be sacrificing stuff, which obviously we know is a thing in Explorer and Historic. I don't know, any kind of cat oven deck that's obviously just put it in because it'll shut it down. I don't know. We haven't seen a sacrifice deck be a thing in Standard in a little while. I wouldn't be surprised if that continues, because frankly we're going to be losing a lot of great tools for sacrifice decks. In Village Rights, which it's funny, we're in a point where Village Rights doesn't even really see play, but it was in Call Time, so it's still standard legal. But we have Deadly Dispute is going to be leaving, Shambling Ghast, Eye Twitch, those are all going to be rotating out. So the kind of sack shell that we already have, which to be honest, wouldn't even really care that much if the creature goes to exile. Like, losing out of the death trigger's a little bit of a bummer, but those decks weren't really recurring creatures out of the graveyard anyway. Most of the time anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, I sack the Shambling Ghast Deadly Dispute, and I'm gonna hit my Lolth on turn 3. They did the job.
Yeah,
So
I think it's got decent
whereas
stats. Like for the mana cost, I think like it's got 2 pretty decent abilities. Plus being able to exile is huge. I mean, let's say, well, I mean in Explorer you almost always want to play Kalitas anyways, but this card's good against Cat Oven. It's good against other strategies. I mean, I think that there's a chance we could see it, but other than that, like I think that the numbers will probably still only be at like a 2 of, you think, right? Probably.
Oh yeah, no, I can't imagine playing 4 of these. I mean, graveyard synergies have to be like off the rails for this to be even a 3 of, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And they just aren't right now. And we're in a situation where we still have the hearse. So like competitively, I can't like hers is just rock solid against.
I called it. I told you Hearse was probably gonna get played in like almost all the decks. Gonna want to play that card. Like
and we're seeing it's funny actually watching the PizzaBox tournaments. I'm really enjoying checking out the deck list that people are coming in, because sure enough, Hearse is like a 2 of in everybody's sideboard.
And we see it all the time in the stream. We'll see it. But enough about an amazing card from Straight to New Capenna. Our next card here.
The design of this is fine.
Anyway, this card's okay. This next card here, we actually have a mythic rare that I just don't know. This is another big blue mythic. Sphinx of Clear Skies. Oh, you're gonna need some clear skies for this one. 3 colorless, 2 blue for a 5/5 Sphinx. Not legendary, by the way. A 5/5 Sphinx with flying in Ward 2. It has Domain. Whenever this card deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types you have. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put one of the piles in your hand and the other in your graveyard. Essentially, we've come to the point where we're just slapping Fact to Fiction on everything and hoping that it gets played. I just think this card, 1, it costs 5, too much. Needed to cost 4, my personal opinion. Maybe 5's too much. The ward's great. Flying's cool. The stats as a 5/5 are pretty decent, but my main concern is it has a connect. So most of the time, there's probably not many things in the way, but also at the same time, like, you're just gonna hit, like, this card hits and draws a card. If you're playing like blue-white, it hits, and then your opponent gives you the option of one of your top 2 cards. If you're playing 3 decks, or 3 colors, excuse me, then maybe you'll get to draw 2 cards off of it. I'm just not excited. It's just it really reminds me of the other blue mythic from Streets of New Capenna. That's like the 6 mana one. It's like a 5/4.
The Ulting Arbiter, but that one you get a trigger when it enters, in addition to and it's on attack, not on connect. Big difference. I was just about to say. I was just about to draw that comparison too, because like of the 2, I'm running Arbiter all day. Like if I have to pick between one or the other, Arbiter's just better. It gives me something the moment it hits the field. It does allow me to put stuff in my graveyard by drawing me 2 cards, and I'm discarding 1. So if I like both the cards that are off the top of my library, I just get to hang on to them and then chuck 1. Whereas this gives my opponent agency to mess with me, which is not always ideal. In a situation where I want cards in my graveyard, if I'm running 3 or 4 colors, in my mana base, and I have like a lot of Triomes or something, so I can get a decent domain hit on this, like best case scenario, your opponent has to separate 2 piles of 2 or 3 and 1. Like best case scenario, you're hitting 4 off this.
It just feels like a rare. Like this card doesn't. This is a mythic. None of this card feels mythic to me. Honestly.
I'm not feeling it.
It's not even legendary. Like I don't. I'm kind of just like let down by it. I really like expected like. I really love this set so far. Don't get me wrong, but a card like this like I'm just like, man, why is this like mythic? You know, like this is a
Yeah.
card where I'm like, man, like this isn't the card we're gonna remember the set for. But
Well,
I
and
would love if
yeah,
it was like gas bomb. It's a blue card, right? Like,
right. Well, but even let's look at some other Sphinxes that have been printed recently. I mean, we have Rafine is a friggin' Sphinx, which is conniving whenever a creature attacks. Doesn't even have to be Rafine herself. We also have, like, in recent memory, there was Dream Trawler from Theros Beyond Death that drew, like, it buffed itself, drew cards just on attack. Again,
mm-hmm.
it just drew a card when you attacked, which is what this is almost trying to do, kind of. And then if we go even further back a little bit to Amonkhet, there was Unesh, the Cryo Sphinx, which is the Sphinx Lord that buffs up all Sphinxes. Or no, it doesn't buff Sphinxes, but it makes all your Sphinxes cost 2 less. And every time a Sphinx enters the battlefield, you get a Fact or Fiction. But like a true Fact or Fiction. It's like 4 cards off the top. Your opponent separates them into 2 piles, and you pick one. And it's for every single Sphinx ET being. So if you want to have, including Unesh themselves. So if you want to do Sphinx Tribal, you could with that, and you can do some really cool things with it. I've done dumb janky brews with it. It's a load of fun. But like this doesn't have any of those upsides. Like, could you imagine like one situation where I could have seen this be good is if it says where if the domain trigger said whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top X cards for blah blah blah. If it wasn't just on the Sphinx, then all of a sudden I'm in an Azorius control situation or Azorius Flyers situation. I'm going to attack you
Kind of
for
like
3 or 4
Rafine,
flyers.
right? Like
Exactly.
it would get played with Rafine, and then maybe we
Yep.
kind of have a pretty good deck where your mid to late game is like crazy hard to deal with because
Mm-hmm.
your cards are
Yeah.
unblockable and they're drawing just a ton of cards.
And I'm gonna, yeah, exactly. I'm gonna attack you with 4 things. You only block 2 of them. I get to Fact or Fiction twice. You know, like that would be dope. Like, and that would be phenomenal. And maybe a little bit difficult to resolve. It might take a little while, but at the same time, like it would be really powerful and really really cool, and definitely
Yeah,
worthy of a mythic spot. This, as it stands, I don't see
just
it.
feels
Like,
rare.
yeah,
Just feels too
just
rare for
it
me.
feels like a rare. Yeah, it'd be an okay rare.
Just like another, feels like another rare Sphinx.
Mm-hmm.
Our next, we have 2 cards left here that we're actually going to go over in the video. The first one is Lightning Strike. It's back. It's actually a really strong card, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just expect this card to probably get played in Standard somewhere. It kills Planeswalkers. So which, if you don't know, Lightning Strike, colorless red, instant, 3 damage to anything. Just your classic Incinerate for anybody who's old school. Essentially
Right.
like a instant speed, 2 mana, 3 damage. It's a card that almost always gets played. You're gonna see it. You know, we talked about off the video, we talked about like the Boros aggressive decks, and I think that Lightning Strike essentially could end up fitting into some of these decks that's still going to be around maybe after rotation. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just think Lightning Strike's definitely there. It's good all the time. It kills almost everything whenever you need it to. Planeswalkers, creatures. Yeah, Ham, you got anything else to add about the classic Lightning Strike?
At the end of the day, lightning bolted home is still pretty good.
Oh yeah,
Like it's just rock solid, and it's insane. Well, and we were talking about the strangle test. Like, does something survive strangle? Well, now like lightning strike is instant speed. It's 3 damage. It's exactly
to
what
anything.
to anything. So
Yep.
this is going to be the like. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the lightning strike test, 100%. Like, that's just going to be the thing. We need to, if your creature has less than 3 toughness, sorry, it's just like it's gone. It's
Yeah,
just
it's not
that
gonna
simple.
make it.
It's
This
just
and
not going to make
Strangle
it.
together are maybe potentially gonna make the red deck still feel pretty
Hmm.
viable with enough removal in between and some additional burn on top. Because I know for the Boros deck specifically, Royal Eruption's leaving, and this card
Yep,
actually fits right in there. The Blood Chief Adversary, or excuse me, the Bloodthirsty Adversary is really great with this card, right? Just more burn on top. Like,
100%.
yeah, I just
Well, it's
you're gonna see
yes,
this card.
oh yeah, no question. And it's yeah, the that red aggressive deck has a lot of great removal early now, and Lightning Strike can slot into that role. It can also just be that last 3 you need to close the game out. So
Yep.
I think it's really flexible.
Its card's great in
It's good
control
stuff.
decks because
It's just
even
great.
in control decks you can just burn your opponent out and then
Hmm.
just beat them down with whatever you got left. Maybe some tokens from Wandering Emperor, anything like that, and before your opponent knows it, the game's over and you've turned the corner.
Yep, totally. Well, and interesting too. This is coming into a standard where Thermo Alchemist is still legal. So we haven't
Chandra's
really
still around. The three
Sean's
mana
still around,
Chandra's
exactly.
around.
And I mean, the Nujaya, maybe it's one of those things we haven't really seen a good burn deck in Standard recently. Like the red aggro has continued to be a thing, and that does often has some burn backup. But we now have Play with Fire. There's not going to be Lightning Strike. We have Thermo Alchemist. I mean, are we in a situation where we might see a legit red burn deck come back?
I
I'm
think
actually
we'll
not
probably
opposed to
see
that
like a
idea.
red deck wins. I think without the
Mhm.
Embercleave, you will probably see something in the middle, where maybe you play like the Devastator, a few
Mhm.
good burn spells, and then some really efficient cheap threats early in the game that just kind of essentially play like a Goblin Guide type of thing, where you get to deal some early damage quickly and then finish them off with the burn spells, the
Yeah.
Chandra, like the Jaya Ballard.
Yep.
Is probably going to get played with this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, not really much else to add. Lightning Strike is a card that, even in modern Magic, I think the card's still pretty solid. I mean, everyone still wants to play a Braid. A Braid's still going to
Mhm.
be in, so I think you're going to see a Braid plus Lightning Strike probably in unison, where your Braids are now going to get pushed to the sideboard, and you're able
Yep.
to use Lightning Strike, which gives you reach in combat and reach in terms of like ending the game. So overall, a really solid card that you're gonna see. Definitely like a top common in the set for sure. And if I'm
Mhm.
drafting the set, which I'm probably gonna be drafting a ton of this set, I will be taking this card almost over everything.
Yeah. No,
That's just
this
what
is
it
going to
comes
be
down
that
to.
this is going to be that common that you like there you can get a playable rare in your first pack, pack one pick one, but if Lightning Strike's in there it's like
Yeah, probably take Lightning
maybe
Strike.
like
Um,
yeah, it's great.
it's like
It's
the
just great.
angel I told you. Remember the 3-drop angel
Mhm.
that gains you a life and draws you a card? I can't
Yeah.
remember what
Oh,
it's
Inspiring
called, but
Overseer. If you see, yeah, exactly. If you're drafting to Capenna, you see Inspiring Overseer, pack one, pick one, just grab it.
you're
It's like one
probably
of the.
taking it.
It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things. Like, yes, it is easily the best common in the set. You could almost argue it's one of the best cards in the set. It's absurd. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
it is
That's yeah.
absurd. But Lightning
Anyway,
Strike's just like that.
yeah. Lightning Strike is yeah, potentially at that caliber. It's excellent. Yeah.
So our last card on the list here is a card that I'm not gonna lie. Whenever I see cards like this, I'm a bit skeptical, but it's a cool card. Astor, Bearer of Blades. Let's hope that the blades are getting bared. Two
Mhm.
colorless, red and a white. So this is a HamHocks card, actually. You know what? You see what's behind Ham there? That's a huge motherfucking hammer
Yeah, buddy.
that
I
costs way
mean,
too
yeah.
much to equip, but with Astor out. So, Astor, let's get to it. Two colorless, red,
Yes.
white,
Let's
4
go.
4. Legendary creature, human war. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 7, which is pretty deep. You get to
Mm-hmm.
reveal a equipment or vehicle card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom randomly. Equipments you
I'm already in.
control.
Let's go.
Yeah,
What else does
yeah,
it do? I
already
don't
in.
even care. I'm in.
Equipments
Anyway,
you control only cost 1. Vehicles you control have crew 1.
100%. I'm in.
So
100%. Yes.
your
100. Let's
hammer
go right now.
only costs 1, and your crews are even cheaper. So now you can maybe crew your chariots if that's your cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
It also
Or your
has good
colossal plows.
stats. It's a 4 mana 4/4 up front. Yeah, colossal. Wow,
Yeah, colossal plows on the menu all of a sudden.
what a magic card. What do you think about this card though? In all honesty, outside of like the hammer deck,
Yeah, I
it
mean,
does make the
obviously
hammer
hammer
deck
it works.
better.
Yeah.
In Explorer potentially or
Mm-hmm.
historic. Other than that, I mean, there's no. Even if we're doing Embercleave, I just don't even want this card because Embercleave, I just want cheaper cards to play.
Sure.
Um, I just we see these cards all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I just unless I see like a Umazawa's Jite or something, I'm not really excited about
Yeah.
this card, right?
Sure. Well, and I don't
For
think I
standard,
will
for
be
standard.
absolutely shocked in standard. Exactly. I'll be absolutely shocked if Astor's playing standard. Like blown away. I don't think it's gonna fit in
Eventually, it
standard.
might maybe
Even
in
with
Brothers War,
yeah,
just like you said. What
maybe.
if we see Battle Skull reprinted? Like if we see Battle Skull reprinted, then yeah, okay, Astor into Battle Skull is kind of messed up. You
Well,
know what I mean?
Batterskull originally appeared on New Phyrexia, didn't? And we're going
Yeah,
back to New Phyrexia at the
yeah, we're
beginning of
going
next
back.
year.
Yep.
Anyway, but yes,
So
so
maybe
living
I'm
weapon
telling
might
you.
be a
So
thing. But
there
anyway,
could end up being like an equipment eventually that makes this card
totally.
good. But right now, most of the good equipments are leaving. Like Maul of the Skyclaves is
Mm-hmm.
gone. You know what actually is really good with this card? That's kind of silly that I seriously want you to make this deck. Let's say that I'm not able to get the early access, but you do, which I think
Okay.
you will no matter what. But
Yeah,
you'll
I was
get
in the last one, so yeah.
the the black enchantment that says whenever they take damage they lose. So instead you get to like equip it for like 1. I think
Okay.
the ability still costs 7, but being able to equip for 1 feels pretty good.
That could be fun. It'd be fun.
I think that that's gonna end up being like something pretty strong there.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Actually, with the way this is worded, it says equipment you control have equip one. This would also work with reconfigure creatures, if I'm not mistaken, because their type is equipment.
Yes,
So I can
yes.
see this worth like reality chip doing some cool things.
Ooh,
Because that's
okay.
one of the things about reality chips. The equip cost is like 3, if I'm not mistaken. And so all of a sudden, once you've actually equipped reality chip, you don't really have any mana to use any of the stuff that you got on the top. Your opponent kills the thing. It sucks. So Astor gives you an opportunity to just equip that. And on top of that, we can put that in a Jeskai deck with JOYRA. And so all of a sudden, like maybe there's some interplay there that could be really cool. I don't know. There's something there.
But I want you
I'm
to play
intrigued.
this card, man. The
I'm
early
gonna I'm gonna I'm
access.
gonna find a way. I'm gonna find a
I
way to make
want to
this
see
work.
you play this card with a hammer. I want
But
to
I mean,
see a screenshot on Twitter that's
mhm.
you being like, "Yes, I did it with Astor."
There is going to be like one of the things right now in Explorer Hammer Time. A piece like it's funny. I actually am trying to make Hammer Time work in like every format right now because I think it's so much fun. Like if you have not like equipped a core duelist with a hammer and just smash your opponent for like 22 damage on turn 3 or whatever, or turn 2 even,
You're
it feels
missing.
amazing.
You're missing out.
You're missing out.
You're
It's the
definitely
best.
missing out.
Yeah. It like it's very inconsistent, but man, when it hits, oh, so satisfying.
Oh, does it
But
hit?
one card that is clutch in that deck that it's funny. I've seen some other content creators, some other brewers try to make Hammer Time work in older formats, and it's really tough in Explorer because we don't have cards like Sigarda's 8 or True Steel Paladin, which are like really great pieces of that archetype, and not to mention like Stoneforge Mystic, of course. So one of the things about Explorer that's tricky is you have to use cards like Resolute Strike, which is meh. That's big time Sigarda's 8 at home. Um,
Yeah.
like it's not good, but it does the job. And then the other one that I'm using a lot that I've seen I haven't seen other people adopt quite the same way that I have is Brunor, the Battle Hammer. Dude has hammer in his name. And it allows you to spend 0 for the first equip ability you activate each turn. So the thought with that is I have my little 1/1 that I don't, that's whatever. Already have my hammer in play. On turn 4, I cast Brunor, equip the hammer swing.
Yep.
There we go. Thing accomplished. I'm now attacking with this gigantic monster that you just have to deal with or die. And Astor kind of fits that role. But the problem is, if I play Astor on 4, I can't equip the hammer yet using Astor's ability. But what makes Astor potentially better than Brunor in that deck is that first ability, looking at the top 7 cards and going to dig to go find your thing. Because that Hammer Time deck needs 2 things. You need to have a hammer in play and some way to equip it cheaply. And Astor gives you both of those things on one card. Nahiri doesn't have that. Brunor doesn't have that. Forging the Tyrite Sword and Fighter Class, all these like pieces that we're kind of working with right now do not have that, but this card does. So it's intriguing. I like it. And on top of
Yeah.
that, it works with vehicles too. Because like all of a sudden, Bank Buster can be in there to like draw you additional cards, and it can still crash
Crew
you
for
in. Like
one. Yeah.
you're right. Yeah, Crew for One. Like there's some. I don't know. Like there's something there. I like this card. I like it a lot actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see if like they end up printing something, or there's already, like you said, like the hammer strategy might
Mm-hmm.
actually get a bit of a push in Explorer where it didn't have, missing some tools before to kind
Yeah.
of help make the hammer and some of the other equipment cheaper.
Yeah. Well, and if you like right now, if you like equipment and or vehicles in Commander, ding ding, you like
Yeah,
here you go.
there you go.
Like it's right there. Just do it. Um yeah, and I think if Astor just needs one thing to work. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've seen it before too. Like there was actually there's an Is It Merfolk card in Theros that cared about equipment. But all the equipment in that standard sucked. And so it
Mm-hmm.
just never saw play to the point where I can't even remember the guy's name.
Yeah, like
Um,
taps for mana, or you get to do something. I can't remember what it
yeah,
was.
like equipment.
Yeah.
If you attack with creatures with equip, or all your equipped or enchanted creatures like had flying or something, like, it was actually pretty cool. But it
Yeah.
just didn't like it
Just didn't
didn't
do
have any
it.
supporting pieces. There was
Mm-hmm.
just nothing around it. It's like I'm gonna equip my Iron Short Sword to give +1/+0 to this thing. Like yay! It does. I don't know. It wasn't there. So if they of course reprint Hammer, like then obviously Astor just that's probably not gonna happen. But I can dream, right? I
Somewhere.
want standard Hammer Time. I wanna make it happen, but that's probably not gonna happen. Cool idea though. Um, But if there is a large vehicle with a heavy equip cost or a heavy crew cost, like a Colossal Pile, like a Console Dreadnought, those kind of big monster vehicles, all of a sudden Astor makes that viable. If there is an equipment with a really high equip cost, Astor makes that viable. If those don't exist, this card sucks. Like in your chosen format, if there is not a bomb ass equipment or vehicle that has a high crew or equip cost, if those don't exist, this card doesn't work. It's kind of like Greasefang, actually. Like, Greasefang in Standard isn't really a thing, but the moment you go into a format with Parhelion, Greasefang is the thing.
Oh yeah.
It's like the moment it has that one piece supporting it, it's insane. And Astro's the exact same way, I think. Like, maybe not as busted as Greasefang, but it's
Yeah, it's the same
it's
type
that
of
style.
idea. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that actually ends up being all the spoilers that we had. It was quite a bit of a dump here.
Yep.
Kind of reminds me of Capenna. They seem to be doing this a lot where the first day they're just like, here's like 20, 30 cards and go
Mm-hmm.
nuts. Obviously it wasn't that many cards, but it's quite a bit of cards to get through either way. I really appreciate all the viewers who actually got through the whole video with us here. If you've been enjoying the
Yes,
content and
thank
you
you.
haven't already, hit that subscribe button, the bell notification, like the video, comment down below. Would be greatly appreciated. Don't forget, we host 3 tournaments a month. All are free to play. Next Sunday, the 28th of August, we have a free to play standard event. That link is going to be in the description, as well as all the content that HamHocks produces. HamHocks, just a great content creator, and on
Oh,
top
thanks,
of that,
buddy.
they stream. I think you stream like 4 or 5 days a week, right?
I stream 5 days a week,
5 days a
Monday
week,
through
yep.
Friday, starting at around 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and go till around 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every day. Yeah, well, Monday through Friday, so 5 days a week.
Yep.
Yep.
I myself stream on Twitch 4 days a week, 3 during the week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, 7 p.m. until whenever, and then on Sundays we have our tournaments which start at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Usually those go for about like 6 to 8 hours as well, but definitely take a look in the description below for all that information. Thanks again for watching the video. Let us know what you think about this set, how you feel about the spoilers overall, if there's a certain card that speaks out to you, what your opinion is on what could or could not get played in a constructed format. That would all be greatly appreciated, and I hope that you all stay cheesy. See you next time.
Later.